What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Breaking Bit with me, your host, Walker America. I am still not sure about that title, The Breaking Bit. We're going to work on it, though. We're workshopping it around. We are figuring out what sticks and what does not. Excited to be back with you guys. This is the second show that I've done here with Roxham. We have a 3-hour marathon show ahead of you today, and I think it's going to be a fun one. We're going to be talking about orange pilling, bringing people onto Bitcoin, educating them about Bitcoin in sly, roundabout ways through various medium. One of those is fiction, one is nonfiction, one is film. So I'm going to have 3 different authors and filmmakers with you here today, and with me, I guess, talking about what they do, how it relates to Bitcoin, and how we can bring more people into this world of Bitcoin through ways that are maybe not quite so obvious. So with that said, let's go ahead and bring on our very first guest of the day, Michael Sullivan. And we're going to bring him up to the stage. Michael is the author of the recently released book, like just released, hot off the presses, Blood of the Bourgeoisie. And I just started this book. I'm only a couple of chapters in, so no spoilers, please, Michael. But welcome. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me. This has been a topic I've been obsessed with for the last few years. So I got a lot of thoughts and pumped to get into it.
I have a lot of questions, so it's great that you have a lot of thoughts. So maybe let's start out a little bit, just so people kind of have a sense for you and maybe your background as much as you want to share. But how did you get here to be writing a big? I guess you called like a Bitcoin thriller, right? Is that a fair characterization?
Fair for sure. So I've been writing every day pretty much for the last 8 or 9 years. Started off as a hobby of mine, kind of just working through things, using writing as a tool to think through stuff. And I was like, I always had this bucket list thing that I wanted to write a novel. So I did that. I wrote my first novel. It was a whole thing, and I learned a lot along the way. And I got into Bitcoin somewhere along the lines. And most people who've interacted with the orange coin at any point know, like, this thing changes you fundamentally as a human, and like flip worldviews around, change the way I look at the people around me and everything. And I felt so much gratitude for the network. I was like, I need to do more than just use this thing. I want to create something inspired by it. I want to create something that I think I can contribute to it in some small way, at least. So that's a little bit of the genesis of the book.
I love. What was your first? So this is your second novel, then?
Yeah, I actually have a couple stacks of them over here. The first one was The Final Flaw. It's a very different topic. It's about genetic disadvantages and embracing things that are different about you. And then Blood of the Bourgeoisie, that you were just showing off there too.
Nice. So first book was not at all about Bitcoin, or had no Bitcoin themes. Was this pre you being a Bitcoiner, basically?
Exactly. I wrote that one. I published it in 2022. I had been writing it since 2018. And then basically immediately, or a couple months after releasing the first one, I was like, I got to do this again. I got to use this skill I learned to make something for Bitcoin.
As you look back at the first book that you wrote, kind of pre-Bitcoiner days, are there things like, do you still recognize the author who wrote that book, or have you changed so much as you wrote this second book that it's sort of unrecognizable to yourself?
So the through line between both of them is technology. The first one is about genetic disadvantages and embracing them, but it's set in a world where genetic defects are beginning to be removed via technology. So my general techno optimism that Bitcoin elevated in me was still a little bit present there, but is significantly more present in the second one. It's crazy how much going through something like that changes you too. Just like writing on a single topic every day for years really makes you think about and just change your viewpoints on these things too. Because I started both of them with a little bit of a spark of an idea, but it becomes more and more mature the longer it goes on, and kind of ends up having a life of its own, is sort of how each of these books feels like for me.
So how were you personally exposed to Bitcoin? How did you start going down the rabbit hole?
Oh man. So like a lot of people, had a little bit of exposure back in the Silk Road days. That was the first touch point, experimented a little bit with it. Yep. But I was so interested in psychedelics at the time that I went down that rabbit hole rather than the Bitcoin rabbit hole. But came across it again in about 2017 when some coworkers were speculating with various shit coins at the time. and never once really got exposure to Bitcoin then either. But the 2021 era came around, started being more interested in money in general. And then early 2021, I just went like straight down the rabbit hole deep as soon as I kind of first came across these ideas a little more, and was willing to admit that I was wrong, because every single other time interacting with it was like just the FUD you always hear from people. I just had not seriously thought about it. And I kind of got slapped in the face a couple of times seeing the price go up. I'm like, I'm wrong about this. I have to reevaluate my perspectives.
I think that is, it's almost a cliche at this point, that when you hear this story, because I've heard it now, that was my own story as well. Heard about it first in the Silk Road days. A friend of mine was procuring some things off of an free and open internet marketplace, and I'm so glad that Ross is free now. That is incredible. But he was, he was like, Walker, I'm getting some goods from this website, and they're telling me I need to use these Bitcoin thing. And have you heard of this? Do you know what this is about? I'm like, he was like a finance guy. I was an engineering guy. I don't know. Maybe that's why he asked me or whatever. Who knows? But I was like, dude, I don't know. I don't know what the heck you're talking about. I do not care. Back to whatever fiat distractions I was engaged with at that time. So completely, I didn't even engage with it beyond just blowing it off. And then same thing, you hear about it some years later. And I realized actually, I didn't actually start stacking sats until 2020. And so I've actually, I've still to this day ignored Bitcoin longer than I've been stacking sats. Like once I get over 6 years, then I will have finally been stacking longer than I ignored Bitcoin, but I'm not there yet. And I think that's like the case for a lot of people. And so that really brings me to this idea of, you never know what touch point it's going to be for somebody that really sends them down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. And we were talking just off screen before this, that you can't force somebody to really grok Bitcoin. You can give them an orange pill, but they have to take it themselves. It's the orange pill. It's voluntary. It's not the orange suppository. You can't force somebody to all of a sudden blow their mind about Bitcoin. They really have to want to do it. And you don't know what touch point it's going to be that actually gets somebody to that place. And I think I'm becoming more and more convinced of this, and it's why I love to see books like yours out there, that it may not be the direct approach of, hey, let me explain what Bitcoin is. Let me send you a bunch of Bitcoin podcasts. Let me, send you the Bitcoin standard. Those are all great things. And those things work. Those things worked well for me as I was going down the rabbit hole, but they don't work for everyone. And I think we need different approaches. So as you were, I guess, how long after really getting into Bitcoin did you decide I'm going to write a Bitcoin thriller? Like, was that a pretty quick thing for you where you're like, you know what, I need to do this?
Less than a year. And to give you a slightly more backstory about myself, I've been like obsessed with learning and teaching. My wife is a teacher. I'm a Brazilian jiu-jitsu instructor, and I taught people to code for quite a long time too. And like one of the things that really stuck with me in that was that a lot of times people want to just throw information at you. But the best way to actually like genuinely get people to understand a concept is to inspire interest. It doesn't have to be just this fire hose information. It just has to be a little gem that'll stick with them. And I really wanted to apply that like ethos to this book, where you could like give it to somebody, and it's just a captivating read either way. But I wanted to inspire interest, just that start, like that first spark, because I've personally seen Bitcoiners fail miserably trying to pitch this thing to people, like going deep into like the 21 million, just like how the network works behind the scenes. And that's just a failing way to do that with a huge percentage of the population. I'm nerdy. I love like reading about the history of money and the technology and how this thing works, but that's not what my wife is going to read. She is not going to read the Bitcoin standard. It's not going to happen. But like her reading group is going to read this thing, and they're going to get a ton of exposure to Bitcoin in doing so. So I did that. I think is just a unique tool that didn't exist quite in the way that I'd wanted it to. So yeah, I made it.
I love it. I think that's a great example of, you can just do things. You, as Bitcoiners, we have agency in our own lives. You can just go write a book. You can just go also start a podcast. We need more Bitcoin podcasts. I'll keep beating that drum. Without giving any spoilers, because again, I've just started this. I'm only a few chapters in. I'm hooked already. I told you this right before we got on. You start strong. Like this is not one of those slow burn starts where you're halfway through the book before anything happens. It's like it starts happening. Can you set the stage a little bit for what the book is about, just in a general sense, so people have some idea?
So like really exactly what happens up front is two billionaires are speared over the bowl of Bowling Green, or the bronze bull on Wall Street, with 12 seed words carved into them, and just like blood. It's very brutal scene to open up with. And that kind of is how the entire theme of the book goes. It's basically, in a lot of ways, a new age Robin Hood sort of thing, where killing the rich and distributing their money to poor people is kind of what some of the people in the book are trying to attempt. Without going really deep into it, because I really do want to avoid spoilers, like this has been some things that have been in my own like subconscious over the last few years have made their way into the book for themes, right? Like even among Bitcoiners, there's a lot of divided groups, obviously. Like, this everybody knows with the Knots versus Core stuff going on right now. But even like how optimistic we all are about the world. Like basically these two people believe and use the Bitcoin network, but in very different ways. One trying to use it to take from the rich, give to the poor aggressively and with violence, and one believes in it in more of a hopeful way about the future, in a peaceful way. There's also tons of ideas about America in there as it takes place over the 4th of July weekend. And there's one of the characters is escaping her country to the United States of America, and is just very strong believer in the ethos that the country was founded on. And I just think that idea in general is pretty tied with Bitcoin, as I always thought Bitcoin was a great representation of what America was founded upon.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think Bitcoin is very much in line with the American ethos, the American idea at its core level, right? And it actually, I think, makes that idea, that general like root level American idea possible in a way that perhaps wasn't before, because we've centralized so much control in the federal government, because we've centralized so much power in the Federal Reserve, the public-private banking cartel that runs our money, that controls the price of our money, that turns on the printer. Like those are a giant bloated federal government and a central bank are not American ideas. Those are communist ideas, ultimately. Like that is literally from that. Marx would be just gleeful, and that's not to say that America is worse than everywhere else. Quite the opposite, I think. Still, despite America's flaws, it is, in my opinion, very biased, but it's the best country in the world. But that doesn't mean it can't improve a whole heck of a lot, and I want it to. And so I'm curious. We're obviously at a very, like, culturally, politically, a very tumultuous time, to say it in a very understated way. How much of that is kind of expressed in your book? I mean, obviously you're starting out with two people being skewered on the Wall Street Bull's horns. So, it's starting off with a bang, but how do you, did you try to tread lightly around that stuff at all? Or did you just kind of embrace it and go into it and sort of accept that chaos as part of this story?
So as an author, I feel like fundamentally need to empathize with all of your characters. So even the ones doing the bad things, you have to kind of get into their mindset. And there is so much rage towards the wealthy that I felt like Bitcoin, I feel like, really taught me a lot about how much value some of the more wealthy people in our society bring. But there's just this general resentment of success in America that's starting to rise. And that has been in the back of my mind the entire time writing this. And I think it's just this fundamental growing thing. And it was wild to me that the Charlie Kirk assassination happened like right before the launch of this thing too. I was kind of like, the timing was sort of wild, where my book is literally about like killing successful, wealthy people and whatnot. And like that happened a week beforehand. I was kind of nervous about the whole release for that reason, but it clearly is escalating and continuing. And I see this in so many people that I interact with too, where they just feel like this fundamental resentment towards people. Like I had a friend reach out who saw that I released the book after we'd had a heated debate about this exact topic like a few months ago. I was like, wow, I did not realize you had been spending this much time thinking about this topic and whatnot. And yeah, it's as much optimism as Bitcoin has given me, I do feel like it's kind of pulled back a little bit of the veil of like how problematic this communistic thread that's like beneath a lot of our country is becoming.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where the more you learn, the more it is easy to slip into despair and nihilism when you understand more about the way the world works. But then it's like, well, thank God for Bitcoin, because if it were not for Bitcoin, I think most of us would, if we were here where we are now in terms of our understanding of the way the world works, and we didn't have Bitcoin as the solution, we didn't have it as that light at the end of the tunnel, we would be pretty darn nihilistic and depressed and despondent, because it's one thing to fight against something when you have a solution. It's entirely other thing to be, realize the faults of a system, but have no way out of it. And thankfully, Bitcoin does exist. We do have this way out of it. So I think a lot of Bitcoiners, while we see these incredibly negative sides of this fiat regime, we see that there's hope. And that is like this undercurrent that runs through all of us that I think is so important. I'm curious too, how difficult was it, or how much did you think about balancing kind of, okay, you want this book to have mass appeal, obviously, right? Your author, the goal is to have as many people read it as possible. But how do you balance that with knowing that, okay, a lot of people turn off a bit when they hear about Bitcoin because they've just been fed so much garbage for so long? Was that a balancing act at all for you, or did you not think about that too much in the actual writing and conceptualization of the book?
It was incredibly strategic the way I had it set up. I had varying groups beta read this, right? Like 85% of them were non-Bitcoiners because I wanted to make sure it worked well with people that were outside the Bitcoin ecosystem. And I'm obsessed with Bitcoin, so I have a relatively good perspective on it. But the other 15%, the Bitcoiners that I had read it, were all like, yeah, you should put Bitcoin on the cover. You need to have Bitcoin in the title and all these things. I was like, I understand where you're coming from. I know, like, there's this massive, fervorous group of people that want to support it. But I even constructed this book in a way where I made sure the word Bitcoin was not mentioned at all for the first few chapters. I think chapter 4 is the first time the actual word Bitcoin comes in. And I don't start like making it apparent that this book is like Bitcoin's pretty freaking central to this plot until like it slowly ramps up. And by that point, you've already been sucked into the story enough where I'm hoping to keep people along there. It's not just hope either. I've verified this with a variety of different people now that have read it, loved it, and had more interest in Bitcoin coming out of it too. So I kind of have like a proof of concept release that I did to some beta readers and friends and stuff. And so far it's worked, and it's inspired a little bit more interest in Bitcoin with them. So kind of successful on a small level so far, but I am so interested to see if it resonates with a larger group or not.
I think that's huge. And I also understand Bitcoiners wanting to be like, put Bitcoin in there. It's got to have, Bitcoin on the cover. Now you've got some nice orange tones on the cover. There are some nice orange tones. So to me, I was like, okay, as a Bitcoiner, I know that this is a Bitcoin book, but the rest of the folks may not. But I think that it is important. It's the foot in the door technique, not the door in the face technique, right? Mm-hmm. You want to get in there. You want people to already be hooked on this before you risk turning them off. And it's not necessarily their own faults. Like we said at the beginning, we ourselves ignored Bitcoin for a long time or dismissed it. Most people do. And you can't blame them entirely because they've been fed just a lot of lies about Bitcoin. And so it's like, I can only imagine that was a difficult balancing act. But I think, and I really hope that stories like this will have larger appeal. Because again, ultimately it's a story about the conflict of our age, right? It seems like that this is really, and again, I have not finished it yet. I'm only a few chapters in, but it seems to be that you're setting the stage for that conflict of the haves and the have-nots, or as somebody said on my show the other day, the have-yachts and the have-nots, which I thought was great. How much did you think about just like that, that class struggle? Because obviously a lot of the neo-Marxists these days, still view it as completely just the class struggle. It's the billionaires versus the rest of us. And if they would just pay their fair share, everything would be fine. We don't have to change anything else. Just give more power to the government, tax the rich more, and everything will work itself out, right? Like, how much do you address that in the story, I guess, for people to look forward to?
So again, character-driven story. So one of the characters very much agrees with that mindset that is not a big believer in Bitcoin, this kind of thing. So you slowly do get a little bit of exposure to that side of the argument too. One of the things that I think fiction can do poorly sometimes is just like force you to see a perspective or be really preachy. And part of the goal of the book was to expose people to Bitcoin. So I was really walking a fine line through the entire thing, not being too preachy about these ideas, being more pragmatic. So you can see functionally how Bitcoin is working. So not huge spoilers because it's only a few chapters in front of you, but one of the characters does escape from her country using Bitcoin in her head, which to me has been the most moving stories in all of Bitcoin. Interviews with people that have literally escaped war or out of their inflation riddled country and came somewhere else holding their money in their head. I tried to channel that as good as I possibly could in a like captivating character. One of the unique things about fiction is you literally get to ride around inside people's heads, and like story allows you this unique way to like embed an idea into emotions. So you get an understanding at a deeper level than just reading it in a fiction or a nonfiction book rather. So really hit that hard. So it's less me being preachy about like, this is why you should learn about Bitcoin, and more the character doing a thing that fundamentally shows you through their actions why Bitcoin was useful to them. And it slowly ramps up through the book too. It gets pretty central towards the end. But
so, I guess, what do you want people to come away from this book with? Like, what is the goal of this book? I would assume to tell a great story first and foremost, but from the Bitcoin side, from the cultural side, what do you hope people, when they turn that last page and they read those last words, what do you hope they feel?
Hope, without question. That's like, it definitely ends on an optimistic note, like minor spoiler, but yeah, hope, and how positively this network could impact America or any country. But it's just like, this is the country that I grew up, the country that I love. I wanted to use those themes throughout the novel, but it's an inherently hopeful message at the end. Even though characters differ from that quite a lot. Some characters spiral more through the story, become less optimistic. There's a lot of conflict and violence. That theme continues on throughout for sure, but it definitely ends on an optimistic note. And I hope the people that are getting more new exposure to Bitcoin just leave it with more interest than they started with.
Do you, how technical do you get in terms of, as a part of your storytelling, how technical is the Bitcoin lore that's in there, let's say?
Starts extremely non-technical because again, you want to optimize for getting people in the door, optimize for getting them through as much at the beginning and like engrossed in the story as possible, and slowly ramps up throughout to the point where like Bitcoin and how Bitcoin works and some of its properties are fundamental to the way the story ends in its final scenes. So like, I really don't want to spoil that bit.
No. Yeah. It's tough. It's tough with this, I don't want to force you into any spoilers, but I'm, just always curious, like how deep it gets. So let's say it's not daunting at first for folks.
Yep. And I couldn't write a book that's not like about Bitcoin interesting to me, right? Like I did write this with the idea that like my wife's reading group could go and read this thing and enjoy it the whole way through. But it's also just like what I wanted to exist, right? Like you have to be a little bit selfish in that regard.
Oh yeah, you got to write something that like you are personally going to like, right? Something that you want to see in this world. And I think right now we don't. There's a good number of Bitcoin books, nonfiction Bitcoin books. We're going to talk to George Mekhail a little bit later, who wrote kind of a Bitcoin book that's not about Bitcoin. It's about parenting, so it's nonfiction, but it's also kind of that sly roundabout way. We'll talk to Avi Burough later, who wrote another Bitcoin fiction book and may have another one on the way. But most of the Bitcoin books that are out there right now are nonfiction, and there's great ones. There's the Bitcoin Standard, obviously. There's Broken Money by Lynn Alden. There's The Big Print by Lawrence Lepard. There's a lot of really great books out there. But I feel like there's a lot of people out there who don't really like to read nonfiction. There's also a lot of people out there who view fiction as like a waste of time. For a while, actually, I myself was really just exclusively reading nonfiction. I was reading Bitcoin books. I was reading Austrian economics books, as I was going down this rabbit hole. And then I actually was as an author, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, Devin Erickson. So he wrote Theft of Fire, an incredible sci-fi book that I highly recommend to folks. He's got his next one coming out soon. And that was a book that I devoured. Like I devoured it, and it kind of reignited my love for fiction, for sci-fi. And it's another book where he talks about Bitcoin in it in a very like Bitcoin's just kind of part of how life is. It's set in the future, et cetera. It's not like a Bitcoin book, but it's got, Bitcoin is a part of the book. And I think that it feels like we're entering an era where that we may start having more fiction Bitcoin books come out than nonfiction. I don't know what your thought on that is, because at a certain point, it's like Bitcoin, all of the game theory and everything around it, sure, it can get very complex. The rabbit hole is never ending, right? But in terms of just kind of explaining like what Bitcoin is and how it works, there's been a lot of really great books written about that already. Like that space is reasonably well saturated. Do you think that we're entering a time where the the sly roundabout way of talking about Bitcoin through fiction or through other means will become more prevalent? Like, do you see this as the start of kind of a new era, let's say, in Bitcoin literature?
I certainly think so. And if you see other technological revolutions, like books have been central to them too, and novels specifically. Like, think of the way that 1984 just like embedded an idea into the culture, where people just reference, oh, 1984. They'll just put that tag when referencing government overreach in various ways. So I think it's going to continue to grow. A random story that comes to mind actually on this topic is all the books you mentioned are brilliant. So I had a coworker who was starting to get really interested in the ideas of like money printing a little bit. Like, they were really annoyed with war. I had a conversation with them about like, oh, they were really aggravated with how money could be printed, but they're just not really a nonfiction person and really did not have much interest in this topic in the same way that I did. They were like annoyed with it. And I was like, all right, we've got the Bitcoin standard. Broken money's brilliant. The Bitcoin standard might be a little bit too much for her, but maybe broken money will do it. And I just adore broken money. So I like go drive this book to her, give it to her. And when I like gave it to her in my hand, I could see her just like overwhelmed. Like, I just got this like 600-page book that has money on it and it's like deep about money. And I could realize like, oh, she was not interested in it in this format. And this was like, I was well into writing the book at this point, but it just kind of reinvigorated my confidence and the need for this thing, because she loves fiction. She would have been engrossed in a fiction book about this topic. But yeah, so I think it's great that we have all these different variety of books out there. I think we need a lot more fiction books about Bitcoin too. Like, mine is not going to resonate with every single person. I did my best to make it like what I want and what I think people will like, but you never know. There's just so many different people out there. Like, well, you can never have enough Bitcoin podcasts, right? Like, you need them for different people. So yeah, just a couple thoughts on it.
Oh, love it. What we're going to do real quick, we're just going to take a very quick commercial break here. We're going to be right back. I've got a bunch more questions. I know you've got a bunch more answers. So yeah, we will be right back here in just under 3 minutes. Stay tuned.
The future of capital markets runs on Bitcoin. Introducing Roxum, the first ever exchange where Bitcoiners can trade treasury stocks entirely in BTC. Get exposure to top Bitcoin holding companies like MicroStrategy and Metaplanet, priced in Bitcoin from the start. No fiat, no middlemen. This is what financial freedom looks like. Early access now live at roxum.com/treasuries. Built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
In a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the centre of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're travelling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxum, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Rocksome, rock-solid markets.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
All right, we are back. So as we were just taking that quick commercial break, I was just thinking, you were mentioning, wife's book group reading this story. And I can't help but thinking that maybe what we also need is some Bitcoin smut out there. Like if we really want to reach outside the Bitcoin echo chamber, maybe we just need some Bitcoin fantasy smut. I don't know. Somebody's got to be working on this out there. But if not, I think it's a hugely underserviced market. Thoughts?
It is not me, but I guarantee you.
Me neither. Well, it's funny because again, it's like for us that are deep down this rabbit hole, we will listen to 40 hours per week of Bitcoin podcasts and then another 40 hours per week of Bitcoin audiobooks and then read, I don't know when we actually work, but like, we read Bitcoin books and we are so, even though we have already ingested so much, we have a craving for more and more and more. We are in a minority, right? We are obviously in a minority. Most of the world still has no exposure to Bitcoin. Most of the world, even if, most of the world hasn't even heard, well, they've maybe heard of Bitcoin, but they still have they have not gone anywhere close to even the entrance to the rabbit hole yet. So I think I just love your thoughts on like more broadly, like where Bitcoin culture is at, let's say in the quote Bitcoin community. I know some people don't love that phrase, but like if you went on Bitcoin X right now and search Bitcoin, or just if you went on X and search Bitcoin as somebody who's coming in from outside the echo chamber, you'd probably just see a lot of people calling each other pedos and talking about some knots versus core, whatever that means. And like, that would be like most of what you would see about Bitcoin. That and like caps lock Moonboy tweets about, buckle up, here we go. Like that feels like it's not the greatest way to get people into Bitcoin. And granted, these discussions are important, sure. Less so maybe the caps lock Moonboy stuff. But what do you think, do you have a message, I guess, for Bitcoiners who maybe want to contribute in some way, but feel that maybe they don't have what it takes, or they don't know where to start with this? Like, because you just decided to write a Bitcoin thriller. You just did it. So what advice do you have for people for, maybe it's not a Bitcoin thriller, maybe it's something else. What should people do if they want to, if they're non-technical, but want to kind of contribute to Bitcoin in some way to help, orange pill as many people as possible or expose them to Bitcoin?
Two thoughts. First one is just start, like just getting one foot in front of the other and building the thing just creates some momentum and then starts building and building. And the more plugged in I've been to this community, the more it's given back to me too. I wrote a lot of the book just alone, right? Like it's a very lonely process, but sharing and being more vocal on Twitter specifically, like I really did end up connecting with tons of people and Bitcoiners broadly. And the more and more I did that, the more it gave back to me. So I'd recommend just getting out there and putting yourself into the world. Number two, Bitcoin is becoming this like fragmented organism now where even since I got into it, like I've felt different phases of myself the longer I've been a Bitcoiner, and like just interest too, right? Because there's so many little subsets of Bitcoin that you can research and become really interested in. So like for starters, like I remember just binging Odell's like podcasts about stuff, learning about privacy and just as deep into the actual core of the network and using the thing as I possibly could. Recently, I've been like really curious about the treasury company thing, how that could work. I could feel my interest waning slightly in that regard, but like my favorite bits of Bitcoin, like there's just so many little subtle groups, and it's kind of interesting to bounce across them, see them, and then just engage with them and see what people are thinking. Because it's just become this thing that's more than just a singular group where like, at least when I came in, it felt like there was a core Bitcoiner and like so much of the culture was central. And now it just seems more fragmented, at least. And it's kind of weird.
I suppose perhaps that's not a bad thing. And maybe that's a natural thing too, right? Like Bitcoin isn't any one thing from a cultural perspective, right? People want to put often their own self-identified cultural labels onto Bitcoin. They want to project their own ideology, their own worldview onto Bitcoin. But like we always say, Bitcoin doesn't care, right? Bitcoin is an open protocol. Like it doesn't have wants and desires and needs. It doesn't have a political ideology. It doesn't have any sort of religious affiliation. Bitcoin just is. And so I think, it's, because I totally hear what you're saying. And I'm just wondering, this is maybe just the inevitable result of Bitcoin maturing, is that it's harder to define what is a Bitcoiner, right? It's not just somebody who's a carnivore and listens to 40 hours per week. It's a Bitcoin podcast. Like Bitcoiners are a lot of different things, I think. And so but again, that's a good thing. And I think that's why diversity, not like DEI diversity, but true diversity of Bitcoin content, whether that be the written word, the spoken podcast, music, whatever it might be, more diversity is a good thing there. Like you never know what's going to click with any individual person, right?
Yeah, and you have like an optimistic take around this too. Specifically this week, I have a lot of people on X that are like very into various Bitcoin stocks. Quite a few people that I think are relatively new Bitcoiners would consider themselves to be Bitcoiners, but kind of came in through MicroStrategy or Metaplanet, whatever other ones of these things. I have gotten such a huge amount of support, like people that are like halfway done with this book so far, and they're like inspired by the Bitcoin ethos in it. And like still, like even though they talk more about the treasury company thing, like they're at their core, there's still this like freedom loving Bitcoiner that like adores open networks and stuff. Like even though these different communities are so fragmented, I do still feel like if you talk to them in person, or you like just get a little bit underneath the surface, there is still this Bitcoiner core to those fragmented communities.
I think that that's fair. I would at least hope that that's the case. I think it'll be natural that as Bitcoin becomes more ubiquitous, right? As the Overton window gets wider and wider to the point where it's just Bitcoin just is like, it's just a accepted part of everyone's lives because it's just the money that we use, right? Or it's the network through which we exchange value. I think that it becomes, can anyone be a Bitcoiner when everyone's, quote, a Bitcoiner? Or how much does that, do you still have Bitcoin conferences, for example, in 100 years? Like, I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is.
Yeah, I don't know. It is kind of heartbreaking that future generations won't see this like tight-knit community and group that we came up with. Like, I'm just so grateful for some of the support too. Like I said, this writing process is very lonely. So being able to communicate with other Bitcoiners and share in that journey of learning about money that feels inherently alienating has just been a really great thing. But they won't have that problem. It'll just be water. They'll just swim through it and not really realize it. Kind of like I would imagine people feel about like the printing press. I guarantee you there was a small group of people that were like, this invention, the printing press, is going to change the world. It'll allow every individual to spread their ideas out there. And now we just take it for granted. People just order my book on Amazon or whatever. It just is this thing that exists, concept that no one thinks about. There's no printing press groups or whatever. It just is a technology that fundamentally made the world a little bit better.
I'm imagining now like hardcore printing press conferences back in the day, a bunch of guys getting together, setting type and everything, and just like marveling at this. Because you need that core group of extremely engaged, interested, obsessed people to really kickstart and galvanize any sort of movement. And this is not just any movement we're talking about. I think the printing press is a great analogy because from an importance standpoint, a cultural, a historical, a future importance standpoint, Bitcoin is at that level, right? That is an apt comparison. And so you need people that are just obsessed with this and will have that super tight-knit community that they can build at the start to be able, it's that early innovator phase, right? Before you even get to the early adopters and the early majority, like you need those obsessed pioneers. And I think that, we're probably right now, I don't know what your thoughts on this are, but if you want to go by the technology adoption cycles, like I still think we're in the innovators phase. Like we're like less than, what is it? The cutoff's like 2% or something like that. And I don't even think we're close to 2% adoption of Bitcoin globally. Like we've got a long way to go. As quote expensive as Bitcoin is today in fiat dollars, I think in retrospect it will look very cheap, and it will be evident just how early we were in 2025 in the next 4, 8, 12, 16 years. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Oh, we're insanely early. Just the fact that people say Bitcoin, that thing didn't die. We're super early. I think an interesting analogy here too, back to your point about the conferences, is like there's still gold conferences. There is still this group of people about this. Like gold's been around forever, and yet still people meet about this thing and are passionate about it. Like I think one of a kind of hopeful take here on Bitcoin community being around for a very long time, at least I would imagine for most of my lifetime, is that people are still meeting about that topic. Like, granted, I do think we're going to just kill this whole fiat currency thing given enough time. But even then, I do still think there'll be a bit of a culture around this, realizing that the system is broken and being part of the way to fix it.
It's honestly a great observation about gold conferences. Like gold's been around for literally thousands of years. We've still got conferences about them. So, I mean, maybe Bitcoin's got another 5,000 years of conferences. Who knows? Who knows? I don't know how much longer gold conferences will stick around. I feel like, most of the gold bugs are a bit long in the tooth, let's say. I don't know. We'll see. Peter Schiff will still be going, as long as he possibly can. It's that much is certain. I'm curious too, just in terms of where you go from here. Obviously, you've just published the book. Like, are you able to say at this point, are you planning, is this going to be a series? Is this going to be something you continue on? Do you plan on, if it's just a one and done, do you have more books in you that are kind of Bitcoin adjacent, Bitcoin related, but are not, directly quote Bitcoin books in the nonfiction sense?
So people have been asking me if I'm like how I feel about the book launch. And honestly, it feels weird because I have trained myself to write every single day. I love writing. It's been just a part of my life for a long time. So now that it's over, it's been more unnerving than anything. As nice as it is to share this with people and as euphoric it's felt to hear people's positive things about it, I miss writing. I want to write another one really badly. I also made a promise to myself that I would listen to the free market here. Like I whatever happens. Like I have another story in me. I want to write another story about this one. This one is a fully encapsulated story. It's not going to leave off on a cliffhanger. Like it's a full, complete story, but there's opportunity for a continuation if I want there to be. And I thought through that a little bit, but I'm going to listen to the market. If people want it, they want it. If they don't, they don't. We'll see what happens.
I suppose the nice thing is too that, I'm glad to hear actually that it's a full and complete story, because as a reader, sometimes it's frustrating if you're like, this is just part one in something, and now I've got to wait another 2, 3 or more years. If you're George R.R. Martin, like you've got people, waiting till their deathbed for your next installment. But if you build a world that, people like and people like the idea of where this world is at, where it could potentially go, the other stories that could be told within it, you can have stories that are still within that same world, within that same universe, but are not direct continuations of this specific, these specific character lines, which I think is like always a nice option to fall back on.
I also like things that are built to last a long time. Like definitely, it's a common sentiment among Bitcoiners, like to create and build things that you want to be around for a very long time in the future, low time preference, right? I wanted this to be like encapsulated in a way that could age really well. Like it's not gonna have a flash in the pan thing that's just like central to Bitcoin right now that'll be gone in a while. I wanted this to be like a fully complete story that stands on its own no matter what else happens in the future with Bitcoin, or no matter what happens down the road, if I write another one or not. So I kind of get annoyed sometimes too with all the like, surprise, this is going to be a series. I love series. I'm going to read a lot of series. I have a wall of books over here and I have multiple series right over there, but it's not what I wanted this first one to be, at least.
Yeah. One thing I'd love to explore a little bit with you is this, when I got back into reading more fiction and listening to more fiction audiobooks as well, on long drives, it was a great reminder to me, because I used to read fiction all the time. Right. And then again, I told you I went through kind of that nonfiction phase as I was going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, where it was all Austrian economics and Bitcoin books. And just like that was the focus. Right. But getting back into fiction, it was a great reminder that a great fiction has sometimes a much better potential of truly changing your worldview or making you think more deeply about a particular topic than just some standard nonfiction can. Like through the lens of that fiction, you can sometimes arrive at these deeper truths, I think. How much of that is like a conscious process on the part of the writer? Because I think oftentimes we ascribe, especially, growing up, you're reading various, F. Scott Fitzgerald or whatever it is, some like classic, school book that you're reading in school. And they're always asking, write these essays about what did the author mean by this or mean by that. And a lot of times the answer was like, well, the author was broke and they wanted to write a story that was going to be picked up by a publisher and make them money so that they could eat. And like that was the meaning behind it. And they just tried to write a good story. How much do you as an author think about, okay, I need to put this deeper meaning into this, or I need to allow people to reach this deeper meaning? Or does that just naturally come as a byproduct of telling a great story?
I think some people try to do the former, and I think people can generally tell when they try to force it too much. The way it started for me was a spark and an interest, and just kind of building up and letting it have a life of its own. Like that's really, I've said that twice now, but that's really how it feels, where this thing ends up being alive, where you're just kind of pushing it along, growing, refining. But there is part of my soul that's like in this thing, right? Like it has a piece of me and a piece of the things that I was thinking about the whole time. So the way this probably works, I've been working on this for 3 years. The first 2, I didn't really know everything that it was about. But after that, I'd written on it enough where I like really understood the themes deeply and knew what I wanted to like really like emphasize. And then the last bit of editing, and the vast majority of this was editing, is bringing out those themes, making them more central, more embraced, and like so you can kind of like bring out those elements a little bit. I have had some stories that are deeply impactful to me too. I don't know if you can see in my background here, but I have the V for Vendetta mask over here. That's my all-time favorite movie and graphic novel as well. That like just fundamentally changed me. I watch that every single year on November 5th. It's just like a kind of a recurring reminder of this like thing that I've loved. I've changed as a person, but this story has changed who I was. But it really did like transfer an idea from this writer's brain into mine across time and space. And it's just a wild concept. Like fiction is an old thing, but it's still this wild magic technology where you can ride around in another person's brain and essentially live another life and empathize with them. Fiction embraces the empathetic side of that even more so than nonfiction, but nonfiction can do similar things. But like, there's just no way you could experience some of the things you can experience in a fiction novel in the real world.
I think that's a beautiful way of saying it. It's giving you an opportunity to step outside of yourself, to consider a different perspective. Like you should be sucked into it, right? Like that's the goal. Getting lost in a book. There's a reason that's an expression. Like you want to be able to get lost in there, to forget what's happening out there in the quote real world, and really just dive into this story and be able to experience this other life, this other timeline, this other universe in some cases. And can I ask you, how much is your book? I mean, obviously it's set in quote the real world. You're not set in some some other galaxy or something like that. How much do you dig into let's say recent history or things like that, or do you kind of it's more forward looking? Yes, there's some hints of this or that. Like how do you balance that? Because obviously things happen fast in the 24-hour news cycle. Like, and you want this to be something that's evergreen and is going to appeal to people that are long in the future who are not up to date on whatever the current clickbait du jour was at this moment right now. So how do you balance that as a writer?
I had to do 2 different things. Like some was fictionalized. So right off the first page, you hear about the main character, Cal, killed a guy named Max Aldrich, who is loosely based on like Silk Road and Ross and the whole thing. I won't go too much into it, but there's some of that in there. There's some characters, senators and stuff that I could not base on real characters because it's a very violent book and stuff happens that I don't want to say about a real person. But there, in another storyline, the third character, she is from Sudan. And I went deep into researching Sudanese history, and Omar al-Bashir, it was basically a warlord during some time that she was around that country for. And that's all very accurate. So I did a mixture of them as best as I possibly could. So it is based in the real world. It's not like a heavily fictionalized different world, but there's just a mixture of those things, partly so I didn't get sued or get in trouble, because like there's there's some stuff that people wouldn't be too pleased about in there if you were that person. But yeah, because you do want it to be evergreen, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a wise move, especially in just the existing political climate. Like, last thing you want to do, there's plenty of people calling for violence out there, and so yeah, you don't want to be seen as one of them, or be one of them in any possible way. Out of curiosity, okay, you're writing every day. What are you reading when you're not writing? Like, what do you enjoy? Do you enjoy, like, are you currently reading fiction that you like? Do you like, sci-fi, fantasy, thrillers, nonfiction? What do you like personally as an author who is writing fiction?
So I have had the worst reading year I've had in a long time, just because I've read my own story like 70 times this year and like many, many times years before that. But my favorite ones are really diverse. My shelf up here I was pointing at earlier has a bunch of Blake Crouch, who is a sci-fi thriller writer, which is like right up my alley. It's a mixture of those things. I love fantasy. So you said you had a period where you were not interested in fantasy for a while, or fiction for a while. I also had one of those. When I was in college, I was obsessed with like chess and business and all these other things. I was just reading that kind of book. And then I had an experience on my honeymoon where I picked up Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, fantasy novel. It's pretty long, and it was the first time I'd been just like engrossed in a world since I was a teenager, because I grew up reading like crazy, and it reinvigorated my love for fiction so much so that it really made me want to write my own and do that. But yeah, there's been years I've read 100 books in a year. There's been years I've read like 50. I have all sorts of different books around me of different genres. I would say I'm like 60% fiction, 40% nonfiction these days. I mean, I've read like smut books and stuff too. Like I've read everything, because there's a different element too as a writer where I need to understand different genres, where I want to understand thriller writing. Like I love like the Da Vinci Code and those ones. I love high fantasy and Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. I just want to have exposure to the tools that every writer of every different kind uses, so I can decide which ones of those to draw out and use as inspiration for my own, or weave in little things about them. So it's never like a concise answer, but I just love story generally. I love the idea of story construction. My wife is a really talented editor, so her and I will be constantly dissecting stories and things all the time. And I enjoy all of that process.
Well, given that you've read some smut, it sounds like you might be creating the first Bitcoin smut novel. I think we might have something there. Michael, I want to be respectful of your time. Do you still have a hard stop at the top here? Because we've got George Mekhail backstage. I was going to bring him up, but I just want to make sure if you do have that hard stop, that I'll kind of let you transition out here.
No, I would love to see George for a little bit.
All right. In that case, we're going to add George to the stage. We're going to go for actually, you know what? We'll go to a commercial break, and then we will go ahead and bring George right up here to the stage. So stay tuned. We will have multiple authors up here, fiction and nonfiction. You guys can battle it out over whose genre is the best. I'm just kidding, guys. We will see you in just a couple minutes right after this commercial break. Stay tuned.
The future of capital markets runs on Bitcoin. Introducing Roxum, the first ever exchange where Bitcoiners can trade treasury stocks entirely in BTC. Get exposure to top Bitcoin holding companies like MicroStrategy and Metaplanet, priced in Bitcoin from the start. No fiat, no middlemen. This is what financial freedom looks like. Early access now live at roxum.com/treasuries. Built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you, don't go!
In a world far away, Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460, in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the center of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're traveling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxum, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxum, rock-solid markets.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Welcome back to the Breaking Bit. Still not sure how I feel about that name, but we're just going to go ahead and leave it there for now. I am now going to welcome to the stage George Mekhail. We've got Michael Sullivan, author of Blood of the Bourgeoisie. And now we have George Mekhail, author of, I Am Not Sure, Burra, 21 Keys to Sound Parenting. George, welcome, man. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Yeah, good to see you as well. Thanks for having me, Michael. Great to meet you.
You too, George. Excited to read your book.
Yeah, so
likewise.
We were talking here, George. Michael's book it just came out. It is about it's a Bitcoin thriller, let's say, and so it's a foot in the door technique of getting people into to learn about Bitcoin. I'm only a little bit into it right now. I'm hooked already. Your book is a nonfiction book. It's a very kind of practical book about tips for parents, 21 of them, again, with leaning on that Bitcoin ethos. And obviously, as a hardcore Bitcoiner for many years, everything you do it has in some way been painted a little bit orange, right? You've really ingested that Bitcoin ethos and kind of made it part of your life and your parenting style, I think, especially from a time preference perspective. But I'd love it maybe if, George, you could just kind of introduce yourself quickly for folks and let them know, kind of who you are, what you do now, because it's you're not just an author. You do a lot of different things, quite a lot. You keep very busy. I think you've got a pretty interesting interview actually coming out at some point later today, don't you?
Came out this morning. Yeah,
I missed it out. Okay, I'll have to check it out.
No worries. Yeah, premiered a couple hours ago. Got to sit down with Michael Saylor for 90 minutes at his home. So it went well, and excited for you guys to watch it. But yeah, George Mekhail. I am by day the managing director at Bitcoin for Corporations, which is an initiative to accelerate corporate Bitcoin adoption at BTC Inc., part of the BTC Inc. family, and author of 2 books, Thank God for Bitcoin and I Am Not Your Bruh. And I think my whole thing with this book, as you said, is there's a lot of content out there in the Bitcoin space that focuses primarily on Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin? How do you use it? Why do you need it? I noticed that there just hasn't been a lot of books that for Bitcoiners that are like, hey, I get it. I don't need more Bitcoin content. What I need is help me with the practical things of my life. Like I'm becoming a parent. And so I have 2 teenagers and have been bringing my son along with me to Bitcoin meetups and to conferences since he was 13. He's 17 now. And, just got a lot of comments about what did you do with this kid? A lot of people were super impressed with him and actually encouraged me to write a book and just kind of write out all of the practical things that my wife and I have done raising now teenagers. So it's a book that I think is helpful for people with young children. I don't pretend to know how to raise teenagers yet. I'm still in the thick of that. So I kind of try to stay in my lane here. Here's what works for us for young children. And so, I hope it can be helpful. It's definitely has Bitcoiners in mind, but obviously it can be useful for any parent.
I think this is awesome, first of all, and I've also just started your book as well here, and just started Michael. So it's great. I've got fiction and not nonfiction on deck, which is how I like to have it. Get a little bit of both. But something Michael and I were talking about earlier is just exactly what you mentioned. This idea of Bitcoiners that have already sufficiently gone down the rabbit hole enough. They may not want to read just another quote Bitcoin book, right? They're at a different point in their life. Of course, nobody fully understands Bitcoin, but maybe they feel as though they've read enough Bitcoin books, listened to their 40 hours per week enough of Bitcoin podcasts, that they have a decent handle on Bitcoin. And maybe they want something that's still, tinged with Bitcoin a little bit, but is not just in your face all about Bitcoin. And one of the things we were kind of just pondering between each other was, have we reached an era where that shift has kind of happened for people? Like, do we have enough, of course we can never have enough Bitcoin podcasts, never have enough Bitcoin books, but do you think we'll start to see more of a growth in, let's say, books and film podcasts by Bitcoiners, but not explicitly about Bitcoin? Bitcoin's there, it's the undercurrent, but it's not the central focus. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly hope so. That was kind of one of my goals, again, is just kind of trying to encourage this new genre within a genre, so to speak. Super excited about Michael's book. I think it's the first sort of fiction Bitcoiner book, and I definitely think we need more of those. I'm excited to read it. I think, everyone talks about the mandibles, and that's kind of the one we've adopted. It's the closest thing, but it's not written by a Bitcoiner. And I think that is a key difference, right? Like, if we believe in kind of this vision that we're casting, that Bitcoin is going to be the standard that people live on, and it's going to overtake kind of the global reserve currency and all these big dreams that we have, then Bitcoiners need to be at the forefront of creating, new media, and that should span all genres, all criteria. And so, yeah, I hope we see more. I think we've seen a couple. I think the Fiat Food is another example of one, written by a Bitcoiner. It talks explicitly about food, that was published by Safe House. So we're starting to see more of this. Me and you have been talking about doing a dad podcast for Bitcoiners. I think that would be a lot of fun. So I think we also need to continue the Bitcoin education, Bitcoin content, Bitcoin news. That's not going to go away. But I think it's encouraging and hopefully inspiring for Bitcoiners to think about, cool, got it, Bitcoin, done, orange pilled. Here's also what I'm good at. Here's also an area of expertise that I think could be helpful, because I want to read the book that's written by a Bitcoiner, somebody who's already sort of adopted my worldview and is kind of marching in the same direction, and then is teaching me about, here's what's messed up about the food system and why, they're poisoning us or whatever. So I certainly hope that trend continues.
I agree. And I think one of the reasons that I like seeing this sort of blossoming of different types of Bitcoin adjacent, let's say, or, with the Bitcoin heartbeat by Bitcoiners content, and whether that be written or spoken, film, whatever it might be, is, again, it just appeals to a wider subset of people. Like, Bitcoin is for anyone who's willing to learn, right? But you never know what's going to be the trigger that really makes somebody say, okay, I've now been exposed to Bitcoin enough times where I need to really go down that rabbit hole. You have to go down, take that orange pill for yourself. Michael and I were talking about this earlier. It's not the orange suppository. You can't force it on somebody. They have to be willing to do it themselves. But for a lot of people, even though there's more Bitcoin content out there than ever before, a lot of people, that kind of, let's say, standard Bitcoin content may not be what resonates with them for whatever reason. So this is why we were joking earlier, but also not joking. Like, we need Bitcoin smut out there. We need to be casting the net as wide as possible, because you never know what is going to really kind of send somebody on that journey. And I'm curious, just for you, George, if you can tell folks, like, what initially sent you on that journey?
Yeah, I mean, I just got to a place in my life where I was asking a lot of questions about how broken the money is, and I was in the mortgage business when the great financial crisis happened. So back then, I was like, okay, so we're just going to print all this money, we're going to bail out banks. That seems ridiculous based on kind of what I'm seeing in my day-to-day job. So I think that was kind of the first thing that sent me into like this question asking mode of everything is broken. And I just kind of continued down that path. I was a pastor for a season of life, and started to get disillusioned with the financial system of the church. and the incentive structure being broken. I felt like pastors have a role in society to tell the truth and to be calling out these things. I'm like, why aren't pastors talking about how corrupt the government is and how corrupt the banking system is? I don't hear that on Sundays. What I'm hearing is things that basically motivate people to come back and give money so that the church system can kind of perpetuate. And that didn't sit well with me. And so that kind of caused me to continue to ask questions. And so yeah, I think it was my curiosity and just kind of like my discontent with the way that things were going in the world in different domains is ultimately what led me to Bitcoin. It's just this pursuit of truth, right? Like if you look around and you see that the world is crazy, and you kind of question yourself, you start asking, am I the crazy one? Like, is anyone else seeing this? And then you find this group of people who are asking the same questions and who actually have a solution, right? Like that was the most compelling thing, is like, I was tired of kind of doing the complaining and just being like, oh, every system is broken and we got to burn it down and start over. Like, I spent a season of life doing that. And, finding Bitcoin was the first time I was like, oh, this is actually a practical solution that if this works, if this plan kind of perpetuates, and if people can start grasping this, then we can actually, fix the money, fix the world type thing. So that's kind of the TLDR in my journey.
No, I love it. And Michael, I do want to hear from you again. I'm curious, as a fiction author, do you guys look down on nonfiction authors at all?
Yeah, they're definitely a lower class than the rest of us.
Of course.
That's fair. That's fair.
In all seriousness, George, I adore your book. I'm so excited to read it. We didn't talk about this before, but one of the reasons I had my first child was a little bit related to Bitcoin. Like, after being in the network and like using it, I had so much more hope for the future, where my wife and I finally decided to have a kid. So we're actually at number two on the way right now, but I am
Congrats, man.
Case in point, perfect example of like your potential audience here, where I do think there's more and more of us. Like, we're literally reproducing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bitcoin baby NGU, right? We got the NGU technology there too. Well, Michael, I'm curious for you, as a young dad like myself, we both got young kids. We just have the one for now. Two, hopefully before not too long. I think we got to add more Bitcoin babies to the world. But how has kind of being a Bitcoiner and going down this rabbit hole, how has that sort of changed your perspective just on fatherhood? Because you said you really started going into Bitcoin in like 2022, right? So I'm guessing that was kind of almost concurrent with your first child, somewhere around there, or I'm not sure exactly what the ages are there.
Yeah, first kid was born in 23.
Okay.
So it was already after a couple of years for me that I'd been down the rabbit hole.
Okay.
But just I was not a nihilistic person before Bitcoin, but I had so much less faith in the world than I did after coming to Bitcoin. One of the sentiments I hear so frequently among my peers is that I don't want to bring a kid into this crazy world, or some sort of variation of that sentiment, right? Yeah, there's a lot of that out there. Bitcoin is the antidote to that. Like, for me, I very much felt like it was a thing that made me much more optimistic about the future, made me feel like I could actually plan in a much longer term than I was able to before. And that kind of strong base and structure gave me a lot more confidence in bringing a child into the world, and continues to. So, yeah, pumped, George.
Yeah, no, I think that's really well said. I think that's a lot of people's stories, that whole going from, why would I bring another kid into this world, to, oh my goodness, I need to bring as many kids as possible into this world. So I think that's bullish, and that's a trend that I continue to notice, is that a lot of new Bitcoiner babies.
Well, George, you had kids before, I guess, I'm trying to do ages now. I guess one kid before Bitcoin existed, one after, correct?
Yeah, I think Kingston was born in 2008. So yeah, right around the same time. Yeah, I think I fell in that same category. I think looking back, my wife and I stopped at 2 and kind of had that mindset at the time, unfortunately, and probably would have had more kids if that was a different phase of my life, or had discovered Bitcoin earlier. But one of each, one boy, one girl. We're chilling, we're good. But yeah, I think that shift is real. That, I say that having children is the lowest time preference thing that you can do, and I really believe that. I think obviously I'm passionate about being intentional with how we're thinking about raising the next generation. And it really does come down to intentionality. Like, it's actually really easy to have kids if you think about it. I mean, obviously not for women; they have a very different struggle.
I was going to say, don't let our wives hear you saying that. Yeah.
Huge asterisks. What I mean is, like, once they're there, it's like easy, like, for kids to exist. What's hard is parenting, like being intentional, being present, having a plan, having like an actual roadmap for the way you want to raise your children. And a lot of people just have kids, and a lot of people don't parent. And so my encouragement is to kind of have that level of intentionality where you're involved in your kid's life.
We were talking about learning earlier before you hopped on, and something that I think is so interesting about your book here is, like, you had just went through this phase that Walker and I are going to be entering into. Like, some of the best teachers are people that just went through something. So, like, hearing somebody who's a Bitcoiner who just went through this phase of life, who's learned all these skills and then can disseminate that to us, is just so cool.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it comes from a place of, like, we read all the parenting books. We wanted to be intentional and actually think through this responsibility that was, Kingston was a surprise baby. He knows, don't worry, he's cool with it. So we were young, we were like scrambling. It wasn't our plan to have kids this fast. We're like, all right, let's figure out all the books. And so, a lot of the ideas that we share are things that we learn, and sort of, nothing new under the sun. It's repackaged. It's simple steps and keys, but a lot of mantras and a lot of language that we use that I think could be helpful for people to adopt. So standing on the shoulders of people who have gone before us. But I totally agree. Like, it's proof of work, right? I have two teenagers that I think if you met them, you'd think they're amazing, and I'm proud of them. And I think that if we can get these ideas out, then we can raise a generation that's ready to embrace the world that we're trying to usher in.
Can you, because we do have both myself and Michael, younger dads here, can you talk about a couple of those mantras? You've talked about them with me a little bit before, but I think they're super helpful. And honestly, they're things that I'm like, whenever I'm talking to you, George, I'm taking notes, because, again, as Michael said, the best person to learn from is somebody who just went through something, because they have the benefit of hindsight, and you have the benefit of their hindsight. What worked, what didn't, what you do differently. But can you talk about those mantras a little bit? Because I think sometimes people hear mantra and they think it's like some sort of like woo-woo type thing, but these are like very practical, intentional mantras, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. So, a couple of them that stand out. Whiners get nothing is a big one for us. It's like a lot of little kids like to whine. It's a habit that they just come out of the womb and instinctively do. And it's easy as a parent to give in to whining. I'm going to here's your iPad, stop whining, and just make my life easier. We kind of on the onset with our kids established this, whiners get nothing. So, like, if you want to whine, that's on you. We're not giving in. And a lot of these tips really do come down to just having authority and having the wherewithal and kind of the discipline and consistency to enforce what you're saying. So actually, like, if you say whiners get nothing, like, you actually have to carry out the fact that whiners get nothing. And some of there's a whole section in the book about discipline, essentially, which some of the ideas are a little bit controversial. I would say delayed obedience is disobedience is one that I get a lot of pushback on. I think we're kind of allergic to the word obedience, especially as Bitcoiners, honestly. And so it's important to kind of unpack the nuance that what I'm talking about is obedience to your authority as a parent. And the first kind of mental shift that we have to make is that parental authority is unique. It's literally the only type of authority that I'm talking about when it comes to this mantra. It's I'm the dad, my wife is the mom. You're going to listen to us until you're at an age where you can kind of figure things out on your own. My job is to teach you how to be a human, is to prepare you for eventual adulthood. And so delayed obedience is disobedience is kind of tied to this habit that a lot of parents use, which is the countdown method, right? Like 3, don't make me get to 1. And I cringe every time I hear that, because what you're teaching your kid is that it's okay to not listen to you the first time you ask them to do something. So some of these are kind of tied together, right? It's like they're whining and you're trying to go somewhere else or whatever, and they're not listening. So that's another one. What else? Obey first, then ask questions. Another controversial one. It's really meant to convey that if I give you instruction, my expectation is that you listen to my instruction first, but then, and this is where a lot of people what they kind of miss is that there's a whole second part is then ask questions, right? Like I want to be open to, hey, Dad, when you asked me to do that, like, what was behind that? Why did you ask me to do that? Why was that important? But the key is that, they're being trained to listen to your instruction first, and then have a discussion.
Just a quick point on that, George, because I saw you go back and forth with somebody. I had a discussion on Noster about this, where they were kind of pushing. They were saying, I always encourage my kids to ask questions first because I don't want them to submit to any authority. And you basically, you said, yeah, that's fine, but there's a difference between any given authority figure out there, so any Tom, Dick, and Harry, or their parents. Can you talk about that distinction? Because I think that's actually super important.
Very, very important. Yes, thank you for flagging that, because the key part here is like we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Like you can kind of implement these mantras, but also be teaching your kids to question authority outside of your authority, right? And so again, this does require intentionality. It is work, and making these distinctions clear can still allow you to raise kids who are skeptical of the world and who don't necessarily automatically trust authority, don't trust verify type mantras are also important. And for my own kids, I think that's definitely the case. A big part of it has been homeschooling, frankly. Like we want to be the ones that are teaching our kids how to learn, which I think is key. It's not just what to learn. It's not just here's the history book says this about how things went down 100 years ago, and you have to accept that because it's written right here. It's more, here's what this book says, and this is one perspective, and it's a very popular perspective, but there are other perspectives. And so that is the key, is like you're training your kids that your authority is distinct, and that literally any other authority is to be questioned, and when we can do both. So it is important to recognize, like, other people aren't using these mantras with my children, right? They're not saying, hey, obey first and ask questions. Like these are mantras that are for me and for my wife, and that are to be kind of taught in the home. But everything else is up for debate.
I think that's huge. And as you were describing that, I was just kind of thinking that these mantras that you've described so far, especially the ones around, delayed obedience is disobedience. Like a lot of, and just like, don't question, you can question later, you can ask, and we can have a conversation, I can split it. But like when I say do something, you need to do it right now. And that being the expectation, I feel like those are actually very like primal directives. If you think about it, those are survival directives. That is, you need to do exactly what I say when I say it, because if you don't, that lion's going to rip your face off. Like, I think so much of that, and because we live now in a society where lions aren't just, there's not the potential of them ripping our face off at any given time. People haven't had to have that. There hasn't been a forcing function for strictness among parents, or somehow being strict has gotten a negative connotation with being, this oppressive parent who is intolerant and doesn't listen to you and doesn't love you, and all these cliches. But would you agree with that? Like, that this is actually back to like the most basic thing ever, which is you need to listen to me because, listen, if we go back a number of years, like you will die if you don't do what I say. So I need you to do it right now because I want you to live. Like,
totally. No, I think you said that really well. This is back to first principles, right? It's from the title on, right? I'm not your bra. The inspiration for the title just really comes down to this lackadaisical parenting where we're okay with our kid referring to us, yo, bro, like what, mom, bro, like that is a common thing that I'm just like, that is a red flag for me. And so you're absolutely right. And even in this Noster discussion, one of the points I made is like, if you are outside and your kid's running around and you see a car coming and they're about to run into the street and they're not seeing the car and you yell, stop, you'll be like, why should I stop? Or do you want them to obey your instruction first and then have a conversation like, hey, the reason I screamed stop is because there was a car coming, right? And again, a lot of the pushback I think comes from parents who have children who are a little bit older. And I think that's another important distinction is like, these are mostly for children who are younger, and these are like foundational principles to try to instill in them. I'm not saying like the book's not helpful if your kids are older or whatever, but what I am saying is like, it obviously changes. Like with my teenage kids now, I don't say, "Hey, obey first," then ask questions, like because it's not like relevant anymore. They're not running like they see the car, right? Their requests are much more nuanced now, and everything is a conversation. And so that I think is another important thing to clarify. But yeah, you're absolutely right. First principles, back to the basics. Like, gentlemen, this is a football type thing. Like, we are going back to square one, parenting 101.
Well, it's one of those things where I feel like so much of just basic common sense, not just as it relates to parenting, but as it relates to so many aspects of our life, whether it be the food that we eat, kind of like straight single ingredient food versus hyper processed food, or whatever, the media that we consume. So many things have been made unnecessarily complicated, right? Fiat ruins everything, right? And I feel like that one of the things that gives me so much hope for Bitcoiners specifically who are existing right now, who are aware of Bitcoin and who have, Bitcoin doesn't fix you, right? Bitcoin fixes this, but it doesn't fix you as a person. Like, you've got to do that work. Like, you need to work on yourself. You need to work on your family. But Bitcoin can be a great tool and a great lens through which you can view how you might do that fixing to give you a better perspective, I think, and a better long-term perspective, especially. And I'm just kind of curious to either one of you, in terms of like, and maybe to Michael, to you on this, just because we have kids about the same age, those long-term views. Like, one of the things for me that is a very long-term, and it's a sacrifice in the present, some may view it as such, but will pay off in the future. And George knows this well because he did it. I know it because I was homeschooled, but this is homeschooling. This is something that was kind of like the norm for a very long time. Like, kids, you didn't have kids going away all the time. You had kids spending as much time with their parents as possible. And granted, in pre-industrial eras, that was because usually the kids were working the land with the parents hand in hand. But, we've gotten to this place where it's become so normalized to send your kids away for 8, 9, 10 plus hours a day and have somebody else indoctrinate them. George, in the last podcast we did together, you say, like, somebody's going to be indoctrinating your kids. It may as well be you. And I thought that was great. But I'm curious, Michael, if this is something, not to put you on the spot, but that you've thought about it all in terms of, having young kids. We've got, you and I have some years before we need to think about that. But are you thinking about homeschooling? Is that something that's on your radar? Does that kind of align with what you and your wife are planning?
Very much so. So I alluded to it earlier, but my wife is a teacher. So she teaches at a private school right now. But we talk about learning constantly because she sees her kids growing and changing. And fortunately, the private school she's at is a little bit more isolated from the craziness of the public schools. But she has a really great view into it because so many of her other friends in teaching are seeing these kids basically go through indoctrination facilities. We are avidly planning on doing this. I think it's kind of funny, like the things that people want to use their Bitcoin for. Like, some people maybe want to, like, the ideal of yachts or fancy cars. Like, our thing is we want the flexibility to homeschool our children and do it ourselves. That is like top financial priority for our futures right now. And it's only become more and more apparent with each passing year of being a parent and seeing these things and seeing the way the world is trending generally too. We're very, very much in agreement on all of this.
I think that's awesome because, again, this is something like, it's a very low time preference activity, right? But as somebody who was homeschooled and then also did public school in high school, made that decision, told my parents, had that conversation with them that I wanted to try this out. And George knows this, but I'll tell you, is because I was worried that I was really stupid and behind. I was worried because I saw all of my peers that I was always playing sports and in clubs, Boy Scouts, all these types of things. Not one of the creepy Boy Scout troops, thank God. It was a really, really good one. But I was seeing all of my friends constantly, like, they were at school all day long. And then when they got home after, sports practice or whatever, there was more homework. There was a couple more hours of stuff they were doing. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? I got all of my work done, and it was a slow day today. So, it took me a little while longer than usual. So it took me like a whole 3 hours and I was done with everything, and this idea, like, time is our most precious resource, right? And we spend so much of it, and our kids spend so much of it, wasting it, appealing to the lowest common denominator so often. And that's not to say that, everybody doesn't, deserve a good education, but it's just that ultimately you want what's best for your kids. the state may try to claim responsibility for them, but it's on you. And so, even if your kids do go to public school, it's like you still have a responsibility as a parent when they come home to make sure they're getting their real education, right? And I think that that's something that I hope we see more homeschooling. I think COVID was actually a huge accelerant of that, and I think that's a good thing. In the US, in the UK, in Germany, homeschooling is still illegal. It has been since Adolf Hitler, because he borrowed the same policy that the Prussians had. So apparently Germany, they like to erase all aspects of Hitler except for how he decided to indoctrinate children in schools. But we'll just leave that one be for now, because that's a whole other different rabbit hole. Michael, by the way, how are you doing on time? Want to make sure we give you a chance if you do need to drop at some point soon. You're welcome to stay as long as you want, but just want to make sure we plug the book one more time. How are you doing?
No, I do got to drop here. Last thought on this topic specifically is, like, we talked about teaching a lot and learning, and when you teach something to somebody, you learn it at so much deeper of a level than you had previously understood it. Like, it's been fun to teach things to other people, but I am so much looking forward to the experience of teaching my children these things that I once learned, so I could relearn them again and see them through their lens. And I just think it's a once in a lifetime experience. If you love learning anything, you get to re-engage with that process again as an adult. And I'm just thrilled for that experience and can't wait for it. But yeah, I do got to drop here. George, I am so much looking forward to your book. Thank you so much for putting it up.
And we'll plug yours one more time, Michael. Blood of the Bourgeoisie. I just started reading it. People should check it out. We need more Bitcoin fiction. And if you're listening out there right now and you're like, well, I want to write some Bitcoin smut, you should go out there and do it. Michael, thank you so much for joining. It's been a pleasure.
Great to meet
Thanks,
you, Michael.
guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Cheers. All right. Let me know if you need me to pull you off there. There you go. Okay. So, George, I want to talk a little bit about something you talk a lot about is intentionality and this intentional parenting. Can we dive a little bit deeper into that? Because I think there's a big problem for us is these phones, right? And it's really easy to have that phone constantly suck at least a little bit of your attention. They've done studies that even a cell phone placed somewhere in the room, nobody even has to be using it, but just its presence will literally will force distraction on people. It's just something we've been rewired a little bit by these things. And just more broadly about this intentionality subject, like, this comes down to our time, right? The time that we're spending with our kids. I'd love to just know, how did you approach this as a parent? Are there things that you could go back or if you could go back and change them, you would? Like, how do you personally practice this intentionality as a parent? And if there's any tips that you have for folks to really be as connected and as intentional as possible.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, technology is definitely a big one. I dedicate a section to it, along with the discipline section. It's probably the second most controversial, because there's definitely a lot of opinions about this. Like, people go to the extremes of, my kids are not going to have a phone, they're not going to have screens, they're not going to be exposed to anything. What I encourage when it comes to technology is moderation and getting intentionality. So it's like, it's not no screens. It's what is the content that you're consuming, right? Like, we had a couple of shows that we literally noticed that when, like, my daughter would watch, what's it called? Sophia the First. I don't know if you're familiar with the show. It's a show about a little princess who was just like a brat, right? And she just is like spoiled, and she got everything she wanted. We started noticing behavior. Like, anytime my daughter watched the show, she would start mimicking Sophia. And we were like, okay, this is simple enough. No more Sophia the First, right? We are not trying to raise Sophia. And lo and behold, we removed that show and the behavior stopped. And so sometimes it can be that simple, but again, it requires you paying attention. Like, what are they watching, right? Like, is this a show that you approve of as a parent? And, but that doesn't mean like, okay, well, you're not watching any shows. It's like, there's educational content that's good out there, right? Like, we leaned on some of the PBS. There's one that was put on by Mr. Rogers. There's like a spin-off cartoon. I can't remember what it's called right now, but like, that was good. Like, it taught like really like practical, helpful things. So moderating the content, I think, has been kind of one of the tools that we encourage. And then moderating the screen time, obviously. Like, you're not sitting in front of the screen all day. Like, there is a limit to it, and some of it is we get into the weeds of like what we did, where we would reward. It would be like a privilege, right? screens are a privilege. They're not a right. Like, you don't have an absolute right to watch a show whenever you want. It's something that's earned, and it's something that can be removed, and it's something that is easily removed for behavior that we don't want to see kind of continue. We also have a very strict, even to this day, a policy in our home of no screens at the table. So when we're sitting down for a meal, I don't want to see you on your phone. I don't want to see you like underneath, like text messaging. Like family meals and like meals in general should be considered sacred to a certain extent, right? And this one has been, I would say, underrated in terms of like how transformative it is, of just like creating that space where you're not having that distraction. You're just blown away by, number one, how addicted you are to screens, and like how much of an impulse I have even at dinner to try to reach for my phone and be like, oh no, I'm eating, right? And it does, again, start with you and what you're modeling, and if you can have the discipline to kind of demonstrate the behavior that you want to see in your children. But I remember a comment Kingston made a couple of years ago of just, he was out at a meal with friends, and he looked around the table and everyone's on their phone, and he's like, wait, what are we doing, guys? Like, you guys don't do the no screens at the table? Like, it was a kind of an aha moment for him of just like how unhealthy that is. Like, we're sitting here having a meal, let's at least have a conversation, let's at least kind of engage, let's at least be present with each other. And so, no screens at the table, I think that's something you could implement today. That one's for free. You don't even need the book. Like, don't have just make that a rule in your house. Like, it's very, very simple. And I think unhelpful. So the being present with your kids is the first step to intentionality. And I think that it's easy to have YouTube be the babysitter. It's easy to kind of just like delegate and check out, because life is crazy. We're all busy. We all have 1,000 things going on, and scrolling Instagram while your kid is over there, it's an easy thing to kind of fall into the habit of. But you start doing that every day, you start doing that throughout the day, all of a sudden that becomes like your reality, right? And so you have to kind of really look at how you're spending your time, and how much time you're face to face having real conversations with your children, getting to know them, and how much that actually transforms your relationship with them as a parent. They need you to be present in their life. That's the other thing, is like, it's not all about, like, again, what you were saying, like authoritative, like I'm a dictator. It's more like they don't have other people that they're looking to model their life after, right? It starts with you as a parent, and they're little yous, they're mini versions of you. And the sooner you grasp that they actually need you to be a role model, I think the sooner this becomes more real and the responsibility dawns on you. The first section of the book is called "You've Got Kids," and it's just like a, hey, wake up call. Kids are here. It's time to like lock in and parent, because again, it's easy to check out. It's easy to kind of just like go with the flow, and it is amazing. I'm sure you've already realized this, how your instincts kick in, and a lot of these things you already know, like what to do as a parent without anyone needing to tell you. But the hard part is actually doing them. The hard part is actually like putting in the work. And so yeah, intentionality really like starts with being present, and it continues with having a plan for these people, these young humans that you're raising, which, what I encourage is like focusing on character development as like the key thing that is going to make a difference in terms of like who they're becoming.
Yeah, I think that it's one of the biggest kind of almost scary but cool but scary things for me in becoming a dad was exactly what you said about realizing they are watching everything you do, and they are mirroring that behavior. Like often, exactly, literally trying to, now that my son's like talking, mirroring exactly what you say, or exactly the physical action you do, or whatever it might be. They are picking up on all of that, and this is their most formative time, right? So like what you do really does matter. You can't just, slink away and hope, they're not going to see. Like, no. They are picking up, they are cueing on it. They are developing basically in line with what you are modeling for them. And I think that's a tough thing for people, realizing that what you do, it will genuinely affect how your kid is developing. Like it's a hard thing to come to terms with, because you've got to make sure, okay, well, how do I model better behavior then? what kind of behavior do I want to model? How can I actually become better as, as a father, as a husband, as a person, so that I model the kind of behavior my son or my daughter wants to have? It's daunting though, right? Like it's a bit daunting. George, we're gonna cut quick to a commercial break. We're gonna come right back because I've got a bunch more questions for you here. But
Cool.
yeah, we'll do a very quick commercial cut. We will be right back to talk more about parenting and how not to screw up your kids. Stay tuned.
Love it.
The future of capital markets runs on Bitcoin. Introducing Roxum, the first ever exchange where Bitcoiners can trade treasury stocks entirely in BTC. Get exposure to top Bitcoin holding companies like MicroStrategy and Metaplanet, priced in Bitcoin from the start. No fiat, no middlemen. This is what financial freedom looks like. Early access now live at roxum.com/treasuries. Built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin. No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy. Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
In a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the center of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're traveling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxum, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxum, rock-solid markets.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
All right, we are back. So, George, I think one of the things that a lot of young parents kind of worry about right now is obviously the long-term implications of the fiat world that we live in, except most parents aren't actually thinking about it in terms of the fiat world. They're thinking that because they're not yet living on a Bitcoin standard, they're thinking of, okay, everything's getting more expensive and I don't know why, but diapers are costing me a fortune. Just the gas to get to the grocery store is costing me enough. And then I get to the grocery store and somehow I bought 4 things and it's already $100. What the heck? And all of the things that are actually that I would genuinely want to feed my kids, like, meat and vegetables and things like that, are getting more expensive at a faster rate. And I don't know what's going on. If you're a Bitcoiner, you kind of do know what's going on, right? And you've already adopted this solution, which is store the value of your time and energy in the hardest money that's ever been created. And that will allow you to to be able to live in a deflationary world when Bitcoin is your standard. But the vast majority of the world is not there yet. And I'm curious, you wrote a book again you're a Bitcoiner, but the book is not explicitly about Bitcoin. What do you think it takes from the perspective of books, of film, of content in general, of podcasts, whatever it might be? What ends up onboarding the next wave of people? Is there a distinct thing that does this, or is it just the pain of living under a fiat standard gets so great that people are eventually forced to get smart and figure out, how the heck do I escape this rat race?
Yeah, so I look at it like it's not going to be one thing. It's going to continue to be multiple angles, right? And I think as Bitcoiners, it probably makes sense to cheer on all of the angles. Like, for instance, obviously with my day job, I spend most of my time talking to Bitcoin treasury companies, and corporate adoption is something that we're very involved in and pay a lot of attention to, and has a lot of opinions and pushback and skepticism, which I think is healthy and fine. But at the end of the day, it's like, number one, this was always inevitable. Like, I don't know who expected corporations to sit on the sideline once they realized what Bitcoin was, and sort of following in Michael Saylor's footsteps and seeing kind of the success of strategy. Number two, again, we should be excited about adoption happening at all fronts: corporate adoption, institutional adoption, nation state adoption, retail adoption. And so I think that it's going to come from all these angles. It's going to be the pain of what is happening, why is the money so broken, why can't I afford groceries, and what is the solution? So people who are just like truth seekers and who are asking questions and who are kind of fed up with the current system, it's going to come through number go up. It's going to come through the FOMO of okay, maybe this is a real thing, and it's going to come. What I'm encouraging with this book, it's going to come from us actually teaching the next generation that this is real. And it's not explicitly a Bitcoin book. I do spend one chapter talking about Bitcoin and sort of some of the tools that we used as early as possible to have our kids think about this and actually engage with it and learn how to use a wallet, and incentivizing them with doing work around the house. This is another kind of side note, rabbit trail, but going back to kind of the intentionality conversation, one of the big themes of the book and kind of one of my philosophies is that language that we use, intentionality with the words that we use, is critical, especially in parenting, but really in everyday life. Like, I think language is powerful, and the more intentional we can get with every word that we use has an impact ultimately on character development. So when we talk about doing work around the house, we're intentional not to use chores language. Like, chores to me are like, nobody wants to do chores. Like, oh, do this chore. That just sounds like oppressive and like, ugh. Typically what happens with chores is you give a kid something to do that is like, do the dishes or take out the trash, right? And then I will pay you for that chore that you did. To me, that's not reflective of how the real world works. And so we don't adopt that language. We don't kind of adopt that philosophy. The way the real world works is, you are a member of this household and you have contributions to make to keep this household going. And, you get to live here for free, and we love having you, and I hope you stay as long as possible, but you're going to contribute to kind of making this household go, and you're going to do it without getting paid for it. So our kids have jobs that they do, right? So whether it's taking out the trash or doing the dishes, and there's no expectation that they're rewarded financially for that. What they're being rewarded with is having a place to live. Now, outside of that, there are things that we hire them for that we would otherwise hire someone else to do, right? So like, we hired my daughter to clean the car, right? And we pay her for that because that's over and above what would be expected to live in our house, right? And again, that would be something that we would pay someone else for. So why not hire our own children to do that labor? And so, and then obviously we pay them with Bitcoin. And as much as possible, we try to encourage them to engage with the Bitcoin community, whether that's coming to meetups or joining us at conferences or learning about Bitcoin, on their own. And I think so far that's going well. And they've had the benefit of kind of getting in early, and their little amount of sats that they earned for doing these jobs around the house, they've got to watch that grow, and they're like, oh wow, this is a real thing. And even watching them have FOMO, like, oh, I wish I would have got more or whatever, it's kind of interesting. So we do talk about that, but I think this is the highest leverage point that we have as Bitcoiners, literally, is to just, focus on the fact that, we have this idea of low time preference. And so what that means is recognizing we're ushering in the next generation. So it's like, who better to orange pill than the people in your own household? And so I think it really starts with that. It's like, if you don't have your house in order, like, you can't expect to be able to orange pill anyone else. And so it's kind of interesting how many Bitcoiners just kind of miss this. They don't even think about the fact that, like, hey, your kids might be interested in this. Have you ever invited them to a meetup? Have you ever said, hey, you should come along with me? And I'm of the opinion it's never really too early. Obviously, like, bringing a baby to a Bitcoin meetup is probably not going to make that big of a difference. But you stay on that track and you're consistent with it, and they're toddlers running around. Number one, they're going to learn about Bitcoin. Number two, they're going to be surrounded by Bitcoiners. And I think both of those are critical, because we want to expose them to people who are like-minded, who have the same philosophy, who, when things continue to get crazy in this world, it's going to be this group of people that I'm reaching out to. And so having a community of Bitcoiners, I think, is equally critical. I just went off on like 3 different tangents that I don't even think were related to your original question.
I love it. I love it. Any show that I do will always be a safe space for tangents. I like that framing a lot of, this isn't a chore. This is a job that you do as part of this household. And yeah, there's stuff over and above if we're going to pay somebody else for it, well, we'll give you first right of refusal, right? If you want to earn some sats for it. And I think it's a beautiful thing that we as Bitcoiners can do this for our kids. Like, I mean, it's crazy to think of that, like my son, he's under 2 years old. The world he is going to grow up in is so vastly different from the one that I grew up in. And the primary reason for that is because Bitcoin exists. Like, it is sure, you could say technologically, all these other things. Okay, there's other reasons that it's different, but really the main division there, AI would probably be another one that is really, really significant, right? But like, there's still a lot of chaos in the world. There's still a lot of shit going on everywhere. But the things that are different are you have these incredible tools now. I think AI is an incredible tool that, again, kids, my son's gonna be an AI native, right? He will not know a world without AI. He will not know a world without Bitcoin. That's crazy to think about. And how best do you really, prepare kids at this young age to be able to take full advantage of that world? I'm wondering, like, what the job market is going to look like when, my son is getting older. I'm wondering if, I know your son just graduated high school early, which is awesome. Congrats to him. And, a great benefit of being homeschooled, right? But, how are you thinking about that? How are you thinking about, these traditional paths, just do A, then B, then C, then D, and, get the right credentials and do all that? That just doesn't feel like it's certainly not the only way. And it feels like it's certainly not even the best way anymore. It feels like a lot of that stuff is honestly just really outdated. How are you navigating that with your kids?
Yeah, I think this is probably the hardest thing to think through. And it's different, right? Because the world is changing so fast. So it's like, if you have teenagers today who, like Kingston, he graduated high school and he's like immediately like, okay, now what? Things get really, really real very fast. He had the benefit of, coming with me to conferences for the last 4 years, getting that exposure, getting that hands-on kind of work, jumping in, helping where he could, adding value, like learning all of these principles of, like, this is actually what it takes in the real world. Show your worth, proof of work, all these things. And out of high school, he applied for a couple jobs. He met Jack Mallers pretty early on. Jack was super impressed with him, brought him on as an intern at Strike for a little while. And, same with the team at BTC Inc. And so he actually just landed a job with BTC Inc. Working for our customer service team. So it's one of those things.
Congrats to him.
Yeah, man, I'm super, super proud of him. Super impressed. I think it's one of those things as a parent where you open doors, but you can't push the kid through the door. You have to actually watch them kind of step up and show up. And in Kings's case, I think he really did, and impressed the right people, and was fortunate enough to have those connections. The world that we live in is mostly about who you know, right? It's more who you know than what you know. And so I think in his case, he's been both fortunate, and he's worked really hard to earn these opportunities and have these relationships already exist for him fresh out of high school. But I think he's kind of unique in that sense, but I think that the principles are the same. It's what you expose your children to. It's the environments that you put them in. It's the opportunities that you encourage them to pursue. And, Kingston, I would say, it's like, if you think about back in the olden days, sons would accompany their fathers to the factory, right? And they would learn alongside of them, and they would kind of see what they're doing, and they would mimic their behavior, and then they would learn a trade. And then they would kind of follow in the footsteps a lot of times, whether that's like, okay, we own a farm, and so you're going to come kind of tend to the farm with me, and one day this farm will be yours, kind of a thing. Or again, a factory and kind of learning a trade and doing that. I think Kingston's kind of a modern day example of that. It's like, hey, all right, I'm going to this conference, I'm working all day, but you come with me and you figure out how to make yourself useful. And he did that. He kind of learned a specific trade. So I think that as the world continues to change, the key is going to be going back to what we talked about with education. It's going to be teaching your kids how to learn, right? So like when it comes to AI, it's the knee jerk is like, AI is bad, don't use it for school, like people are going to abuse it, and all that is true. But that doesn't mean you want your children to not embrace the fact that this is a real thing, and learning how to leverage it is going to be to their benefit as they kind of grow up and they enter into the job market. The other thing too is there is a distinction between raising boys and raising girls, that if we go back to first principles again and we just admit that, I think that there has been a trend in the world to for like equality and all these things that whatever we have opinions on. But the reality is boys are different than girls. Moms are different than dads. Moms have a different role than dads do. We raise our daughter differently than we raise our son, and we explain why, and there's an understanding. There are nuances to how you have these conversations, how you approach these like really big things like the job market, or what do you want to do with your life, and how are you approaching these types of things. We're now at an age where we're starting to think a lot more about like, what are the environments that you're in where potential suitors are, there. And it's terrifying, especially as a father of a daughter. But you got to be practical. You just got to admit the fact that this is going to happen. So you can sit there and be afraid and have like this mindset of like, oh, my daughter, I'm going to have the gun when my daughter brings anyone home or whatever. Like those are all, again, natural kind of tendencies, but you can't stop there. You have to really think through the fact that, your daughter probably one day, she might want to get married and she might want to have children. And so you can be afraid of that and be like, oh, I hope it works out. Or you can be intentional about it and start thinking through, what are the environments that your daughter is in? Who are the people that she's around? Like, do you know the parents of people that, she's surrounded by? And can you even be a part of encouraging, like, hey, this guy comes from a good family. He's your age. Like, what do you think? We haven't quite gotten there, but I'm like thinking ahead that that's going to be the mode that I'm in, because if you think back to when people were doing this before, it was mostly arranged marriages that came from two families coming together, and marriage was more about building that up and all that. And I'm not necessarily suggesting we go back there, but I think there is a hybrid, or there is a reality that we have to consider, that like, do you want your daughter on the Tinder apps and the dating apps, or do you want to put her in environments where like there are people that you could see yourself joining forces with, for lack of a better term. So that's my hope, is that my daughter finds a good Bitcoiner, and he comes from a good family, and that we live happily ever after. But I'm not naive to the fact that things are changing very quickly, and easier said than done. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot to think about. I think that the most critical thing is to not future trip too much, and just be present with your child, right? Whatever stage they're in is the stage they're in right now. You can worry about all the stuff I just talked about. You can worry about having teenagers when they're teenagers. You don't even know what that world is going to look like, right? So it's best not to overthink about it, and just kind of be present in their current stage, and do your best to show up and to set an example. I think I say something like 97% of parenting is working on yourself, and the other 3% is teaching your children about Bitcoin. And I think that's real. I think like if you're, again, not setting that example, if you're not the role model that your children expect, then you can kind of expect to have a hard time.
It's definitely true, and I think it really comes down to who do you want, what other set of parents do you want in your Bitcoin citadel, someday. Who are you trying to buy up 1,000 acres with at any given time? George, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna bring on Avi Burough up to the stage as well. By the way, George, what kind of time are you dealing with here? I want to be conscious.
I do actually have a hard stop here, so I'll probably have to jump off. But
no, that's perfect. We are going to go ahead and we're going to cut to a commercial break, then bring up Avi. Before we go, just want to thank you again for coming on. Recommend that everybody check out your book, I Am Not Your Bruh, 21 lessons, 21 keys. How could I be so foolish? 21 keys to sound parenting. Anywhere else you want to send folks, George?
No, I appreciate the time. As always, love these conversations. We're going to make the Stab podcast happen.
We're doing it.
I think, it's going down. So yeah, check out the book. I'm on Twitter @gmekhail. Would love to chat.
Awesome. Thanks so much, George. Appreciate your time as always. And very excited to dig into your book. Cheers.
Thanks.
And everyone else, stay tuned. We will see you in a couple of minutes.
The future of capital markets runs on Bitcoin. Introducing Roxum, the first ever exchange where Bitcoiners can trade treasury stocks entirely in BTC. Get exposure to top Bitcoin holding companies like MicroStrategy and Metaplanet, priced in Bitcoin from the start. No fiat, no middlemen. This is what financial freedom looks like. Early access now live at roxum.com/treasuries. Built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin?
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy. Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
In a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460, in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the center of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're traveling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxum, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxum, rock-solid markets.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
All right, welcome back everyone to The Breaking Bit. Again, the name is still under construction. We're not sure. Maybe we'll change it. Who knows? But for now, that's what it is. I'd like to welcome to the stage Avi Burough. Avi is an author, a filmmaker, and several other things as well. You have what I believe was actually the first Bitcoin work of fiction, 24. And then you also have a new film series that you've been putting out called Finding Home. Avi, welcome. Good to see you again, man.
Yeah, good to see you again, Walker.
So I want to let's start. We've had two authors on this show already today. One, Mekhail Sullivan. He just wrote Blood of the Bourgeoisie. Just published that. It's a Bitcoin thriller. George Mekhail. He wrote I Am Not Your Burra, 21 Keys to Sound Parenting. Fiction and nonfiction. You again have a work of fiction that you've published already, and you are in the middle, or you're getting close to releasing episode 2 of your film series, Finding Home. You've had your book out for a while, but maybe if you can give folks a little bit of an introduction just to who you are and how you got to be both a Bitcoin author and filmmaker. And I'm pretty sure you just did the film thing to be able to eat as much food and drink as much wine as possible from what I saw with episode 1.
Yeah, some say that's true. So yeah, look, I'm an engineer originally, electrical engineer. Got into robotics and AI several years ago. Then switched to financial engineering. Studied a lot of securitization and lots of boring stuff. Worked on some esoteric securitizations about 10 years ago at this point. And then at some point, I was running my own consulting firm for a bit, and in 2016, I believe, someone reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'm looking for a guy with securitization background. I'm building this cryptocurrency exchange-traded instrument to be launched on either the Bermudan Stock Exchange or the Gibraltar Stock Exchange." We're talking about 2016. So that I'd obviously heard about Bitcoin before. But that was really my first foray into anything in this broader world, right? Bitcoin, crypto. This is right actually around the time the Ethereum DAO hack was happening, I think in the middle of 2016. So got into crypto that way. Being an engineer, I got curious about the underlying tech, so got into enterprise blockchain technology, sadly.
Oh boy.
Yes.
We won't hold it against you.
Yeah, well, I hold it against myself sometimes. Did that for about 3 years or more. And then at some point in 2019, it just struck me because we'd built so many proofs of concepts on sandboxes, and we get the press release because we work with the innovation teams at large stock exchanges, right? We're talking about like massive securities exchanges, healthcare clearinghouses, and major banks. Build out these quote unquote blockchain proofs of concepts. You do the press release, and then it goes into the implementation stage, and then the real people come, right? The operations people and the real tech guys, not the fluffy innovation team. And they start poking holes in it, saying, "Well, can you scale this?" He said, "Of course we can scale it. We'll just centralize it, and that way we get more TPS." So it's after 3 or 4 of these, I started questioning myself. I mean, the fundamental question I asked myself, and I remember this afternoon summer afternoon in 2019, when I was just sitting back and thinking, could it be that the only blockchain that makes sense is Bitcoin? Could I have been wrong over the last 3 or 4 years? And that was the beginning. So I, over the course of the next year or so, I just tumbled down the rabbit hole, just consuming, reading. Of course, the pandemic happened shortly after, halfway through this process. So that, it's allowed me to take a step back and view the world through a more macro lens, right? And then everything I was absorbing about Bitcoin, it just made a lot more sense. And then, I spent the next 2 years just consuming, listening to well over 40 hours of podcasts a week, back before that was even a thing. Read all the books, the Bitcoin Standard, the bullish case for Bitcoin, inventing Bitcoin, all the the classics. There weren't that many back then, actually, as there are now. Like we're talking about 2020, 21, and a little bit of 22. And then at some point, I said, okay, enough. I've absorbed enough. It's now, what can I do? What can I do? Well, it's my time to create something. And that's when I was thinking about Bitcoin, and I always enjoyed writing. I used to write the Surrealist blog in my early 20s. It's still floating around on the internet somewhere. It's called The Curious Dream Life of Marshmallow Addy. I've always been a fan of surrealism and surrealist writing. And I said, well, maybe I can write, but what can I write about Bitcoin that hasn't been, what can I say about Bitcoin that hasn't been said already? It's like describing Bitcoin, talking about it is like talking about the sunset or New York City, right? Is there anything new under the sun? And then it struck me that, look, I always liked telling stories. And I'd had this idea for a story long before I was a Bitcoiner about a young man whose father suddenly passes away, and he discovers a secret. And in the process of unraveling his father's secret, he learns a lot of things. This father had a secret life, and and there are twists and turns and so on. So I'd had that idea in my head, nothing to do with Bitcoin. And then I took that idea and adapted it to a Bitcoin narrative. It took me, so I started spring of 22, and then I finished writing the book, including a 6-month bout of crippling writer's block somewhere in the middle. I finished that in late or November of 23. That's when I released it. Yeah.
What eventually brought you out of the writer's block, if I can ask?
Yeah, it was Noster, I believe it or not.
Really?
I'd written 5 chapters of the book, and I hit writer's block around September. So between May and September, I wrote about 5 chapters. And then I said, and there was one key character that needed to be introduced at that stage, and I had no idea how I was going to do that. And that was like probably the most critical character in the book. And I was stuck. And then at some point in March, I asked myself, March of 23, am I going to write this thing or not? And I said, well, let me just put a chapter up on Noster and see what happens if people like it. And the response was about 10 or 12 people, but it was overwhelmingly positive. They loved the first chapter. They said, we want to read more. I said, oh, wow, people actually want to read this. So I posted the second chapter. They said, oh, this is amazing. I want to read more. So then it became a constant race of, oh, can I keep writing more chapters? Because I'd gotten into a weekly cadence by then of posting. Can I write enough to post? And it ended up working out.
I love it. The Noster breaking through that writer's block. One thing we've been talking about just in these past couple hours with the last guest was exactly what you just mentioned, that idea of once one is sufficiently far down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, right? And you've read the books and listened to the audiobooks and you've done your 40 hours per week forever. And you should keep up the 40 hours per week of podcasts, of course, and start a Bitcoin podcast as well, no doubt. But once you get that far, sometimes it's kind of like, okay, well, what else? Or how else can I learn about Bitcoin or experience Bitcoin that is not, let's say, directly in your face Bitcoin, right? And I think that's where a lot of people got to, yourself and the other 2 guests that I had. And I'm curious too, you've now have another project. I'd love to talk about that a little bit, Finding Home, and we can bring it back to the book as well. But Finding Home is a very interesting kind of Bitcoin, but not Bitcoin type of show. Can you talk about that a little bit and how you came to come up with that idea and have that new angle, let's say?
Yeah, it's I've always been a huge fan of food and travel shows, especially Anthony Bourdain, because he had this way of, there are several good travel shows out there where you have a charismatic host who's going and describing the place in fairly plain terms, right? And they're having some delicious food, and it's nice. It's a nice escape. You get, and it's shot well, and so on. Bourdain was far more than just a chef, far more than just a traveler. He was a philosopher. And I think what was gripping for me about, starting with No Reservations and then all into Parts Unknown, was how every episode was a deep dive into the philosophy and culture of the place he was in. He treated all of these places with the utmost respect, right? Acknowledging the complexity, a complexity that he said himself that in many cases he wouldn't fully comprehend over the course of his travels, but at least he attempted to. And then there was always the backdrop of the food and the conversations, and it was a search for understanding what was deep within the stones of any place he went to. And obviously with this tragic passing, what has it been now? 7 years, 6 or 7 years now, has left a gaping void in that genre. And it felt like the world had drifted away from that pursuit of just a shared understanding, right? Of a shared acknowledgement of beauty. And if I had to pick, if I had a bone to pick with Bourdain, his worldview was more of a sort of a cynic who was bemoaning what was lost, right? It wasn't necessarily uplifting, right? It was saying, oh, look at this incredible thing, and now our world has gone to dust, right? We don't have this anymore. And it had its own charm, but that never fully resonated with me. And so with Finding Home, this is an idea I hatched about a little over 2 years ago, was I would love to do that show, fill that void to the extent that I can. I mean, there is only one Bourdain, obviously, but try and fill that void, but with a slightly different take. Be the hopeful philosopher rather than the cynic, right? The somewhat bitter cynic, philosopher as well. But we have an incredible instrument of hope in Bitcoin that's available to us. Like so many of us who've gone down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. And I heard you talking in one of your earlier conversations today about, this probably nihilism if there wasn't Bitcoin, right? And with so much of the world in that darkness, why not spread this message of hope and joy and show that there isn't a tool, an instrument that they can use that can help potentially uplift them. So the idea is to tell stories of everyday Bitcoiners who are doing actually heroic things. And that heroic thing is they're living amazing lives of creativity, of building things. So I shot a pilot episode in my hometown of New York City with Shakib Farah. He's a Somali proprietor. He's a Bitcoiner. His restaurant is one of the 5 places in New York that accepts Bitcoin. It's 5 now, believe it or not. It's
crazy that in New York City there's still only 5 places. That's mind blowing.
Well, I will say, at the time of shooting the pilot, he was one of 2 places, Popkey and him. Now it's actually 5. So it's progress.
We're growing.
We're growing slowly. So I shot that. It was really a proof of concept. Kept it simple at home. Shot over 3-ish hours, and it's mostly a conversation. We didn't have that much B-roll. A lot of editing work went into it, and then I had the voiceover narrative just to try and fit a story to the extent that I could in that limited footage that we had. And it was an incredibly helpful learning experience for me, right? In what to do in front of the camera, how to stage shots, and all of that. The second episode I filmed in Prague in June of this year. It's with a friend of mine, Grafton. He's a guy from Mississippi who moved to Prague 14 years ago. He thought he was going to stay there for a year, and he ended up making it his home. And he's running he's part of this incredible cypherpunk project called Vexel that's all about privacy and peer-to-peer Bitcoin transactions. So I tell, and he actually has a remarkable backstory as well. So that one was filmed over several days, several shots. 10 hours of footage, over 200 hours of editing went into it. The music choice was very, very precise. We went with Dvorak, who's a Czech composer. Had to obviously find the royalty-free stuff and
of course
and all of that, but we did. So very precise and intentional music choice. Lots of editing, lots of scenes with friends. With Bitcoiners, group dinners, but all of that just tells Grafton's story of the human web that he's created through this peer-to-peer network that he's building out, and through the proof of work that has echoes in his past in Mississippi as well. So that episode is going to be live in about a week, a little over a week. The trailer is going to drop tomorrow, which, Walker, I gave you a brief preview of.
I literally got goosebumps watching it. Like not just like physically, hair was standing up on end. It was fantastic.
No, and I hope the episode has the same impact as well, because I think it is a powerful story. And the idea is not to make this all about Bitcoin and say Bitcoin. And there's a lot of really good video content on YouTube out there that is very clearly about Bitcoin, right? But first and foremost, this is a human story, a search for belonging, right? For a lot of people, it's through community. It's through food. It's through something else, but very visceral human things. And you try and weave that narrative. And then Bitcoin is just a sly undercurrent, if you will, in all of this. It's not overtly stated, but it's there, in some sense, omnipresent. And the idea is that people enjoy these stories, get some hope out of it, and then wonder, oh, wow, they're using this Bitcoin thing to make their, and he seems like a normal guy, and he's doing incredible things.
Yeah, he's not just some nerd living in his mom's basement. What's going on here? I was told they were all magic internet money nerds. I love this project of yours, and I highly encourage people to check out Finding Home, because it is, first of all, it's beautifully well shot, and you've got a perfect narration voice for it. Like it's all very well put together. It's visually appealing. There's a huge element of community and food and drink and just the human experience, which just makes it, a pleasure to watch, a pleasure to partake in. You feel as though you're there. And generally, cooking and travel shows, it's a huge genre. It's a hugely successful genre. You go on Netflix and you can find dozens and dozens, hundreds probably at this point, just on that streaming platform alone. It's an insanely, there's a huge demand for this. And I think that Bitcoiners creating this kind of content that is, again, has this Bitcoin heartbeat, right? It's made by Bitcoiners, but it's not in your face about Bitcoin. That is one of those things that genuinely has the chance to reach outside of this echo chamber. For the people that don't care about whatever the Bitcoin technical debate du jour is, and just want to watch something. They want to watch something about cool food and cool places and cool people, and have just a pleasant experience doing so. This really fills a gap. And I'm curious, how much more are you going to do with this series? I know you're doing you've done some crowdfunding for this. You've had some sponsorship as well. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think there are a lot of Bitcoiners out there maybe listening who say, like, first of all, I want to go see this and let me check out the episodes. And if they really like it, are there ways to support you? How do you plan to keep this going? Because I know you self-funded quite a bit of it already.
Yes, the first episode with the pilot was fully self-funded, as was the Prague episode. For the third one, which I've actually just wrapped up filming a week ago in Asunción in Paraguay, another fascinating story there. That episode should be out in December. That one, I was able to find patrons. I used this funding platform called Angor. It's a relatively new one. It uses Bitcoin and Nostr. I was able to raise some money through there. I had some other Bitcoiners who acted as patrons, incredibly generous folks who wanted to see a project like this come to life. And I shot that just last week, Walker. There's a tentative episode 4 that I'm going to film in Minneapolis in December. We're still working out the logistics. There's a chance it might not happen, but a larger chance that it will. It's going to be with our friend Open Mike. It's going to be all about value for value music, Bitcoin, Nostr, and of course food and everything else. He has a fascinating Finding Home story as well, which I'd love to tell. And that one, I will have to open up a crowdfund in very short order to make that happen. But the idea is, it's twofold, right? One is this, I put out enough proof of work. So the Prague episode, I think, is going to be at a quality far higher than the pilot. The pilot was just a pilot, and it's good. But this one, we shot a lot more in the second episode, right? And a lot of learnings from the pilot went into that. The editing and so on, right? And then I believe Paraguay will be a notch above Prague as well, right? It's just a constant process of learning and evolution. If there's enough cumulative proof of work, at some point, maybe it's after episode 3, maybe it's after episode 4, I will be able to present this portfolio to a major studio like a Netflix or like Hulu or any one of those. Or yes, fiat platforms, but that's where the eyeballs are. And ultimately, I want people to watch this, right? And then go to them and say, look, this is the quality. These are the stories. What do you think, right? And pitch them and see if it gets picked up there. So the idea is to keep making as much of this as possible. Like you said, I enjoy eating good food, drinking good wine, and having conversations with Bitcoiners, which is, they're fun people, man.
Amen. I'm curious, have you thought about going to, because yes, fiat platforms with the Amazons, the Hulus, the Netflix, sure, but massive pipeline, right? Undeniable. And if you want to reach as many people as possible, that is the way to go. But have you thought about, I mean, there's things like Angel Studios now, the ones who or host the Tuttle Twins, which is incredibly popular. They obviously have a probably more, let's say, mission aligned, if you will, audience that's already in there. Have you thought about going that kind of route, or like, are you open to anything in that regard?
Yeah. So actually, I mentioned the one approach, which is reach out to the large fiat platforms because they do have the eyeballs. The other is, I mean, if people watch the show, right, Bitcoiners, and they like it, you can participate. You can participate in multiple ways, right? Be part of this journey of creation. One is you can, if you have some really good stories. If you know people who found home and through Bitcoin, then please let me know. The other is, you can help support me in making this a reality. And I've heard of Angel Studios. I haven't reached out to them, but essentially that's sort of, I am looking for those types of mission aligned venues or locations that would like to participate and bring the show to life.
Remind me to put you in contact with someone after this, because I think it's awesome what they're doing, and especially as somebody who is now as a child, looking at what Tuttle Twins has done is so amazing, and providing this incredibly based education. Obviously, Angel Studios has way more than just Tuttle Twins, but that's the one I'm most familiar with, and but I know they've done a lot of documentaries and things as well. So maybe it's a good fit. But I mean, my hope would be that eventually everybody wants to syndicate this program, because again, I think this sly roundabout way of talking about Bitcoin without talking about Bitcoin, about telling stories about Bitcoiners and having Bitcoiners be the ones producing these stories, that is so powerful. And we need more of that. We need that to reach outside of the echo chamber, because as much as I think there should be as many Bitcoin podcasts as possible, really, that's not going to appeal to everyone out there. And so we need these other methods.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the way I think about this, and this is a term or a phrase I've been sort of using for the last 2 or 3 years now, which is culture is upstream of adoption. In fact, I gave a talk at BitBlock Boom a couple of years back with that same title, culture is upstream of adoption. And the case I make there is there are really 2 ways of getting people to understand or join this journey, right, to grow adoption. Because first and foremost, this revolution is not going to happen without maximal adoption. So that just goes without saying. A fundamental axiom of all of this is we need as many people on the bandwagon as possible to make this real. So there's 2 ways of doing it. One is you can make the intellectual appeal, right? You can talk about Austrian economics, you can talk about distributed systems, you can talk about cryptography, all of that, and make the case that way to the intellect, and that can work to an extent, but I personally don't believe that scales. What actually scales is the appeal to emotion, right? And if you look at any major religion, any major great idea, they scale through stories, through mythologies, right? Through dance, through music. And I think there's an opportunity here to create that next wave of adoption through emotional appeal. And I know you had Michael Sullivan on a short while back, right? I'm halfway through his book. I think it's a fantastic book. It's a fast-paced thriller. Bitcoin's like ubiquitous, but it's not in your face about Bitcoin, right? And so you have stories there. I mean, that's the reason why I wrote 24 and the sequel that's going to come out in a few weeks, July 18th. And then you see what a guy like Open Mic is doing with Tunester. It's live music. It's Bitcoiners, and they're zapping these live shows, and the audience is getting involved. A lot of these live shows, music shows, there's an onboarding booth where people who come in are handed one of those Primal cards. You scan it, you're on Primal, you get free sats, and then you can use those sats to zap, and then you switch over to Fountain. You make them switch over to Fountain, and you see the zaps and the comments showing up between Primal and Fountain, and then it clicks for people right there, right? So all the while they're listening to their favorite musician. So you have there's so many avenues of bringing people into the fold, of making them understand the meaning of this revolution that we're building. And I think the emotional appeal is the most powerful one.
I could not agree more. I want to talk about some of those other avenues and more ways to tug on people's heartstrings and poke at their stomach and their appetite. When we get back, we're going to cut to a quick commercial break, and then we will be right back.
The future of capital markets runs on Bitcoin. Introducing Roxum, the first ever exchange where Bitcoiners can trade treasury stocks entirely in BTC. Get exposure to top Bitcoin holding companies like MicroStrategy and Metaplanet, priced in Bitcoin from the start. No fiat, no middlemen. This is what financial freedom looks like. Early access now live at roxum.com/treasuries. Built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
In a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the center of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're traveling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxum, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxum, rock-solid markets.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
All right, welcome back. We are here with Bitcoin author and filmmaker Avi Burough. Avi, just before the break, you were talking about this idea that culture is upstream of adoption. And I love that, because right now we're seeing, when you look at Bitcoin culture, I think the suitification a little bit of Bitcoin, right? It's we're seeing a lot of these treasury companies pop up. We're seeing Wall Street really finally pay attention to Bitcoin in a meaningful way. We've got the ETFs now, most successful launch in history. Bitcoin treasury companies, a new one popping up every day. Lots of people wearing suits, few of them wearing cool hats like yourself. Where do you think Bitcoin culture is headed, and how important is it to steer that culture, let's say? Or is it just going to do what it's going to do? There's always going to be a suit component of it. How much of a responsibility do we have as Bitcoiners to try and create that culture around Bitcoin? And if we do have that responsibility, what should that culture be?
I think, look, first of all, Bitcoin's for anyone, right? So on the one hand, I'm glad that it is getting the kind of adoption that it's getting. Now, personally, it's not my preferred kind of adoption, but I'm glad that there is a group of people that's paying attention to Bitcoin. I think any responsibility a Bitcoiner has, in this cultural sense is to create the culture that they want to see, right? Just you want to see something in Bitcoin, build it, right? It's you don't like the suits overtaking Bitcoin. You'd rather cypherpunks do it. Become the cypherpunk that you want to see. And if you can code, write some really cool code for privacy tools. If you want to tell stories, tell stories. Want to make music that spreads the message in the way you want it to. Want to make punk rock, bring rock and roll back, do it, right? If you believe that's part of the revolution, then so I think the responsibility in that sense lies in your own actions, right? As opposed to trying to shape the behaviors of other people. And I think there are enough folks who believe that Bitcoin is this sort of cypherpunk counterculture Renaissance 2.0 tool, not something for the rarefied, halls of Wall Street, right? Which on occasion it might appear that way, especially recently. If you do believe it's not that, and it's punk rock, it's heavy metal, it's bringing back joy, it's bringing back beauty and hope, then yeah, you just find your tribe who believes that and build with them.
I'm of the same opinion that yes, like this adoption, this the suitification, I have no problem with it, right? Because this was always naturally going to happen. This is naturally, if Bitcoin was winning, Bitcoin was successful, of course, every company, country, individual is going to adopt it. This is natural. This is a part of the progression. This is what it looks like for Bitcoin to be winning. At the same time, that doesn't mean that has to be the Bitcoin quote culture. And maybe at a certain point when Bitcoin is completely ubiquitous, this idea of Bitcoin culture, it will just seem so silly, right? We'll be in a different paradigm at that point. But I'm sort of curious, you're telling these stories that are, again, have a Bitcoin heartbeat, but they're not explicitly about Bitcoin. They're told by you, who's a Bitcoiner. They're told about Bitcoiners who are doing cool stuff. They involve food and drink and time together with friends and family and community. Do you think we start to see more of that? And do you, as somebody who's making this series now, Finding Home, do you have a message for people who are out there who are maybe like, I want to make this change. I want to get involved. I want to tell a story. I just don't know what story to tell and where to start. Maybe a better question is, how did you decide this was the way that you wanted to go about this? I know you love Bourdain and everything, but like, what was it really for you that said, yeah, I'm going to make this show that's kind of about, finding home, finding your place in the world, finding your culture, finding the food that you like. How does one come to that? And what advice do you have for other folks who are treading that same path?
Yeah, look, it's hard to, if you're sitting there and saying, let me use my mind to come up with a really cool idea. Let me just construct this intellectual landscape that I will then be able to execute with tactical precision. Chances are you're going to fail. Now, there are some committed individuals who perhaps can execute on that plane. I think for most people, it's to let go of attachments to some future outcome and listen to your gut and follow your greatest excitement. The answers will come, right? I know that sounds like a vague answer, but if anyone wants to do this and they feel stuck, try this, right? What do you have to lose? You've been stuck, so just try letting go. Tune into your gut. What does your gut say? Not your mind. What does your gut say? What excites you the most? And chances are you will find an answer and you'll know which way to proceed.
What is there a type of content or a type of experience, again, in this same vein of Bitcoin heartbeat, but not explicitly about Bitcoin? Is there something that's out there that you've personally wanted? Obviously, you're making one of the forms of it you wanted with Finding Home, but are there other forms out there that you'd really like to see that you think we're just not at that stage of evolution yet, or it's ripe for the taking by somebody or for the creation?
Yeah, I mean, rock and metal, right? I would love to see, and I don't mean people standing up on stage and growling Bitcoin, right, in a death metal voice on stage. I don't mean that. I mean the raw, visceral energy that exemplifies this world we're trying to build in, right? I mean, you could talk about contrast. I mean, again, a lot of metal does tend to be nihilistic, and so maybe an acknowledgement of what's wrong, but really about, you can talk about the darkness, but really is really more about the light that you're heading towards. So I think this Bitcoin to me is metal, and there's only one amazing band. It's called Stardust. and they're Bitcoiners. They're a prog metal band. That's the only one I see in that genre. I would love to see more Bitcoin rock and more Bitcoin metal.
I would like to see it as well. I'd like to see more Bitcoin in all genres, right? Bring it all. We need to see it, and that's the interesting thing. With you mentioned what Open Mic is doing in this fusion of Nostr and Bitcoin, but with a physical world experience. I'd love to explore that a little bit because I think that's a really cool angle. So much of what we think about when we think about either Bitcoin or something, a protocol like Nostr, is we're dealing in cyberspace, right? We're dealing in the network state, so to speak. But here you have this bridge between the online and the IRL. How do you think we start to see kind of more of that? And that this is kind of, could usher in a very nice renaissance. We had these years of COVID where so many people, were locked down by their governments and, to varying degrees. And we lost so much of those in-person social connections, so much of the online, the work from home, all of the, even online dating, all this stuff just accelerated so much.
Yeah.
Do you think we start to see a little bit of a rejection of that? A little more of a desire for these in-person, these real, these tangible, these physical experiences?
I totally believe that. It's COVID was so isolating, and especially if you were in the northeast of the U.S. or on the West Coast, large parts of the West Coast, doubly so, right? It was a very stark and isolating period, which lasted longer than many other parts of the world, of the country as well. And I think a lot of people are craving that real life interactions, tangible interactions with like-minded people. And I think one thing and yeah, you asked what's missing. Another thing is physical outposts, these embassies, these sanctuaries for our tribe to gather. Now you have a few, right? But it's only a few. There's Bitcoin Park in Nashville, and there's PubKey in Manhattan, and then a couple of others is spread out. But I think what would be really nice is these larger cultural hubs, physical outposts popping up around the world, certainly around the US. I would love to see that, where you maybe have one floor that's dedicated to technical talks, or any kind of just talks, right? Then you have a restaurant below where they accept Bitcoin, and then you have a music venue, right? And I think hopefully as NGU continues and Bitcoin has become more of means, you will see more of these physical outposts coming up, because these do become hubs, meccas, a way of, a home base where the culture can permeate. I think it is critically important to have these.
And what you're describing is, that idea of the third place, basically, right? It's not home, it's not work. That, used to be either the church or the pub or whatever it might be, but we've gotten a lot away from church, a lot away from the pub scene. Again, so much has just moved online that I think people have been, even the work has been taken into the home as well in most cases. And so we've really gotten away from that. I think people have a desire to physically congregate in the real world, in the meet space, to engage with like-minded individuals. Like, this is just like basic human nature. We need this sort of connection. Even if you're quite introverted, you still need that connection to a certain extent. And so I hope we see more. I still have not made it to PubKey in New York. Done a couple of their different events though, which have been fantastic. I need to make the pilgrimage to PubKey, but I hope we see a lot more stuff like that. I know they're opening one in DC, but you've got the space in Denver that recently opened. But I hope we see more and more and more of these things. I think that we will. And again, NGU fixes a lot of this, right? That helps from the funding side.
Oh yeah, Bitcoin at $1 million, a lot of these problems go away in a heartbeat, right? It's suddenly you've 10x'd your purchasing power, your savings, and on these physical spaces, I would love to see venues that are not just places for talks, but there's food, there's music. Other culture. Maybe you can have plays, a stage where counterculture plays can be staged, and so on. So I would love to see things of that nature. I think it's nice that there are places where these are more like lecture halls, or where you can have mini conferences and meetups. I think that's great, but I think that's just the starting point. I'd love for it to expand into something more tangible, something that's closer to people's hearts, like food and just food, music, dance, and so on.
Do you think let's say the Bitcoin scene is ripe for a different kind of conference generally? And I'll use conference in air quotes, something that's a different vibe from what we have now. We have a lot of the same right now, and there's various sizes that you can get, various obviously locales around the world that all have their own different unique vibes that is just inherent because of their geographic location, because of the team putting them on, whatever that might be. But do you think there's room for some different types of quote Bitcoin conferences that are again Bitcoin conferences, but maybe not about Bitcoin as explicitly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think cultural festivals, there's a massive area there. Now, there is the Bitcoin Film Festival that happens every year in Warsaw. Now, that is explicitly Bitcoin, but because it is about Bitcoin films. Now, they do have non-Bitcoin films screened there as well, right? But I would love to see maybe another film festival 6 months later, so that we have that. Music festivals, I would love to see a music festival every month, where it's not just a little 20-person meetup. Maybe 300-400 people, maybe 1,000 people show up to these things. A lot of times what we're seeing now, Walker, is, and I'm sure you've experienced this, is you have these conferences spread over the world, and they're great. The pilgrimages for all of us devotees to travel around the world, and then you have these cultural events sort of attach themselves to it, right? Maybe there's a Satoshi Nakamoto at one of these events, or there's a Tunester event at some Nostr conference. But I think I would love to see some standalone cultural events where clearly it is for Bitcoiners, but it doesn't explicitly have to be only Bitcoiners, right? Who doesn't like good music? It just so happens that they're getting zapped while they're playing, right? What about a Bitcoin food festival?
I was just thinking, how have we not, with all the meat eaters in Bitcoin, how have we not had a Bitcoin barbecue competition? I mean, just like this seems actually crazy to me. Maybe there has been one. I guess BitBlock Boom, there's a lot of barbecue around there.
Yeah.
But like, a smoke off amongst Bitcoiners would be pretty sweet. How have we not done that? Maybe we need
exactly. There's the Cattleman's Feast, I think, which they do. I think Texas Slim or one of those folks in that arena, they do that. But yeah, we haven't had a proper, let's say a 3-day food festival. And let's pick a place, Walker, Sardinia. A 3-day Bitcoin food festival in Sardinia. Just think about that for a second. You can have a few talks, but just think about the wine, the seafood, the meat, and the weather. You do it at a good time of year when it's not too hot, not too cold. Amazing.
I think that'd be amazing. I mean, and this is like, just speaking of these kind of cultural elements, one of the, I think, most incredible Bitcoin events that I have been to, which always changes a little bit but has the same heartbeat, is a beefsteak event, right? These are, I mean, it is always around, it's always Bitcoiners, right? But it's Bitcoiners getting together for a Away Slice to make some of the most incredible meat you will ever taste in your entire life. And he's very mindful about the vibe that he curates for these things. And even the lists for these things, it's not just always open invite. Like, usually there's some sort of like a recommendation, friend of a friend type of thing. There's a little bit of a web of trust element, let's say. But these events are always so top notch. They're always so sought after. There's a reason that they're always sold out. Because again, it's getting together, and there's no talks, there's no nothing like that. It's just you get together for the purpose of eating incredible meats made with love and care by a great chef, and drinking and talking with your friends. Yeah, sure, Bitcoin conversations are had. Undoubtedly, there's Bitcoiners together, but that's not the point of it. The point is to get together and eat and drink and just celebrate life. And I think that that's one of the reasons that these are probably the most like successful kind of Bitcoin adjacent events that are out there. And Away Slice has been able to do so many of them for these years now. Like, I would love to see more of that. I mean, you're going to have trouble competing with Away Slice's culinary skills, but that is the kind of vibe that I think is so impactful. Like everybody wants to go to a beefsteak, right?
Yeah. There's actually a Michelin-starred chef who's a Bitcoiner now. His name is slipping my mind. Sebastian something. I saw him speaking at Prague, and he runs a Michelin-starred restaurant, I think somewhere in the UK. And there might be a couple of other chefs as well. Yeah.
We need more. I mean, that's the thing. There's enough Bitcoiners now. There's certainly got to be enough Bitcoin chefs to be able to put together a pretty incredible Bitcoin food fest, or again, a Bitcoin cooking competition. Now that's another genre of show that people love, right? Is cooking competitions.
Sure.
Like, this is an incredibly popular genre. We're giving out a lot of good ideas here, but that's, these are we're open sourcing these ideas. But I would love to see that, with a
Winner
Bitcoin
gets
prize,
ads.
of course. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that would be something. I think if you're a Bitcoin chef and you're listening to this, hit us up. Maybe we just need to make this happen. This is the beautiful thing about Bitcoin and life in general, but I think especially around Bitcoiners, you can just do things. You can just make things happen. This is what you've done.
So I love that walk. Yeah, exactly. You can just do things. I was just going to suggest, how about we make a deal? If at least 2 chefs reach out to either of us, we're doing it.
Okay.
We're making this happen.
Deal. Okay. Deal. It's been said on a live stream, so now we have there's no taking it back now. So yeah, if you are a chef and are interested in either a competition or a Bitcoin food fest, reach out to Avi or myself and let's try to make it happen, because I think that would be pretty amazing. I love, again, to go back to what you said about this culture is upstream of adoption. This idea that just by showing people the life that Bitcoiners are living, whether that be the food that they're cooking, the families they're building, the communities that they're involved in, that's probably the most effective orange pilling tool we have, is just Bitcoiners living their best lives enabled by Bitcoin. But we've got to tell those stories or share those stories for people to realize that, look, you don't have to be stuck in this fiat rat race. There is an escape hatch. There is a life raft, whatever you want to call it, but there's a way to opt out. And right now, I think more people than ever are looking for that way to opt out. They just, between all of the TradFi podcasts and just, garbage reality TV out there, they don't know that, Bitcoin is that thing they've been looking for.
Yeah. And the thing is not, and there's so much misinformation about Bitcoin. Oh, you guys are drug dealers, you're terrorists, and now the latest thing from the left is, it's Bitcoin is a Trump thing, so you guys are just not, what is it, not Nazis? I guess we're Nazis now. So it's amazing. So I think the best way to counteract is not to rail against it and get upset and yell back, is just to lead by example and say, look, would a Nazi be living a life like this? Would a drug dealer or a terrorist be living this kind of life? Just lead with joy.
Lead with joy is a good way to do it. I want to get back to your book a little bit, because we touched on it and then we got very sidetracked by the recent project. But I want to talk about that a little. Did you mention before this, or am I misremembering, that you're actually working on another book as well?
I do, yeah. Yes,
okay.
yes.
Do you want to talk about that at all, or is it too soon?
I will. No.
Okay.
It's actually written and it's in editing right now. In fact, I just got a comment from my editor saying, you need to put an M dash there. And I said, I'm not putting an M dash there, because everyone's going to think I used AI to generate this.
I actually hate that, because I love a good M dash. And then seeing that AI was using them so liberally, I'm like, well, you're ruining the M dash for all of us M dash enjoyers. This is terrible.
So I've gone with the spaced N dash instead of an M dash for most of the book. So 24 was my first book, the one I talked about. And I'll give a brief sort of summary of the story. It's about a almost 24-year-old young man, comes from a fairly privileged family, well-to-do parents. I think the biggest, tragedy in his life was that his parents got divorced when he was around 18, right? And he's he's still angry at his mom because his mom got suspicious of the dad, that he's gone all quiet, or he's acting all suspicious. I'm sure he's cheating on me. So long fighting and all of that culminated in a divorce at 18. So privileged guy, and this is the biggest tragedy in his life up until this point. His dad was an executive at a boring reinsurance company. Is that he dies suddenly, right? So that's where the book begins. It begins at the dad's funeral. And at the funeral, a family friend, a German psychic, comes and says, look, your dad knew a day like this was going to come, and he wanted me to tell you if this were to happen. He said, what are you talking about? What do you mean my dad knew a day like this was going to come? So later, she teaches him this meditative technique where you can sort of access your past memories. And this is actually true in psychotherapy or hypnotherapy. Like if you really quiet your mind down, things you've forgotten, you can actually access. And so this method is called time projection, and she teaches him this. It turns out there's actually the character, Oliver, the protagonist, he has a condition, he's synesthetic. And because of that, synesthesia is when your senses, when you can hear colors and see, taste shapes and that kind of thing, right? So because of that, he's now able to project not just into his past, but into other people's past and into like fictitious places or made up fantasy places. The first thing he sees is his dad telling him, Oliver, there are 24 words and you need to find them. And so now Oliver is again, like I said, privileged guy. He did computer science at Columbia. So, he was working as a programmer in Web3. He knows nothing about Bitcoin. He's in Web3, right? But he's getting disillusioned by that world. And it doesn't click what these 24 words are immediately for him. But in these visions, one of the characters who shows up is a childhood, is one of the characters from his dad's bedtime stories from his childhood. He's called the Nonsmeister, and he's telling him about this place called the Time Chain. And he's like, what the hell is the Time Chain? Right. But anyway, so the story is like the series of visions is written in 24 chapters. Each chapter is a story of how he accesses different past memories, some of these magical events, and finds one word, right? So 24 words, 24 chapters. But I leave it on a cliffhanger. That's the thing, right? And here's the other thing. So Oliver's a Web3 guy. He's going through his grief, right? The shock of his father, who's only 52 or something, right? Who suddenly dies. And in this quest, he goes through his 5 stages of grief, but those are mirrored by his 5 stages of Bitcoin maximalism. Right? Through the Nonsmeister, this sort of Mad Hatter type guide in his visions, he becomes a Bitcoin maximalist towards by the end of the book in those 5 stages. But I leave it on a cliffhanger. So July 18th is the story of is the continuation, is the sequel of 24. And for folks wondering what July 18th is, one part of the cliffhanger, I won't ruin it, but in 24 there is an op return mysterious op return message that shows up that says,
no, not op return.
Yeah, I know. The funny thing is this book is set in 2020. The 24 was set in 2022. So, I mirror all the FTX, all of that stuff. And then July 18th picks up a week later. So it's in 2023. So that the February of 2023 is when Ordinals came out. So I weave all of that into the book as well. And the echoes with today are hilarious. There's nothing new in Bitcoin, by the way, right? It's the same fights that keep eternal September. But anyway, there's an op return that says, July 18th, meet me at the obelisk at 10 p.m. And he's like, what the hell does this mean? So the sequel is about, finding out what exactly is the significance of July 18th. Where is he supposed to meet whoever this person is at 10 p.m.? That's the story. So I just finished writing it. It's in the editor's hands. In theory, I could release it in a couple of weeks, but I don't want it to clash with the Prague episode. So I'm going to release it in mid-November.
And you are you're a busy guy, Avi.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. It's fun.
I love it. Can't wait to check it out. Appreciate the work that you do and just approaching Bitcoin and driving adoption from this cultural perspective. I think it's so important. We're coming up on the end of time here, but maybe just let folks know where they can check out Finding Home, the first episode, the upcoming one, where they can find you on Nostr as well, of course. Let them have it.
Yeah, sure. So the easiest way to get all the information you want about Finding Home is at the Finding Home website. So it's Finding Home, one word, .casa Nostra, Casa, CASANOSTRA.inc, INK. That's the Finding Home website. You'll have all the links to where it's hosted. It's currently on Indie Hub, which is a Lightning-enabled pay-per-view platform. The next episode, as soon as it's out, will be listed there as well. And more information about the show. You can check out my broader CasaNostra.inc website as well, where you'll have information about my book and everything. July 18th will be the sequel to 24 will be out on Amazon. 24 is already out on Amazon. You can just go and search for 24 Avi Burough. You can find me on Primal, or on Nostr rather, at primal.net/Avi, AVI, and on X at Avi_Burough.
And for anyone that maybe has a story about Bitcoin or food or finding home, they should reach out to you. You're still actively looking for new stories to tell for the Finding Home series?
Absolutely. I'm looking for folks who can point me to cool Bitcoiner stories. You can also participate by being a patron, so do reach out to me if that interests you.
Well, Avi, thank you so much for coming on here. This was a treat and a great second episode, a great way to round it out. So I thank you. I encourage everybody to go and check out your work, to check out the work of George and Michael as well. We need more people creating sly roundabout forms of content to onboard more people onto Bitcoin. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you to everybody who tuned in for this episode. I'll be back next week, I think one day earlier. I think it'll be on Monday. But yeah, looking forward to keeping this show rolling. Thanks to the Roxham team. Thanks to Avi and my other guests. And with that, we will close out this episode of The Breaking Bit. Name still TBD. I'm not totally sold on it. We'll see. Thank you guys very much. I'll see you next week.
The future of capital markets runs on Bitcoin. Introducing Roxham, the first ever exchange where Bitcoiners can trade treasury stocks entirely in BTC. Get exposure to top Bitcoin holding companies like MicroStrategy and Metaplanet, priced in Bitcoin from the start. No fiat, no middlemen. This is what financial freedom looks like. Early access now live at roxham.com/treasuries. Built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you, don't go!
In a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the centre of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're travelling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxham, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxham, rock-solid markets.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.